All
Okay.
right, all right. We're here with Andy Baker, strength and conditioning coach, author, and I wanted to record before we start hamming it up. I pulled this last minute on Andy. I said, "Hey, can you podcast today?" That was this morning. Then 5 minutes ago, I said, "Somebody canceled on me. Are you ready?"
Hey, you got to be ready when opportunity calls, man. You know what I mean? And so I look at you've been doing it a long time, and I've been looking forward to doing this. We got started about the same time,
Yeah, I
way
think.
back in the day. And I can remember first seeing you. You'll be familiar with this. I bought Ryan Lee's
Oh
DVD. It
yeah,
was either DVD or VHS. I think it was a DVD. His
DVD.
six figure trainer or something like that. I
Me
don't
too.
remember. It was some kind of course, and you were
Yeah,
in it. You were one of the people. Like it was like a round table.
an interview. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
there was like you
was
and four or
great.
five other guys sitting in like some office room or something with
Yeah.
nothing in there. And I remember it was funny because I always remember Ryan was like, I found this guy. He was out in a park hammering flyers into trees with his fist.
I was I was taping flyers about training with me in affluent neighborhoods and then running away.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
it's
they don't
like,
shoot
yo,
at you.
man, I'm always like, look at this. I got something stuck on my teeth here while we're doing this podcast. I think what's so interesting is back then, the raw nature of like the work we had to put in to,
Yeah.
get the word out there. I mean, I was writing for newspapers
Mm-hmm.
and I was also afraid to leave my information in the newspaper articles because I was training people out of my house, which was, technically it was illegal.
Yeah, the HOA would be coming after you.
That's
Yeah. No,
so
I can remember that too. I mean, but honestly, like I always tell like new trainers, like even now, like even today in the age of, Instagram and, social media and all that kind of stuff, like don't necessarily discount the paper media in your local market. Doesn't
you
work for everybody, but it worked for me, man.
there was a
When I
series
first
of
got off the
books.
ground.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Andy, there was a series of books I believe called Guerrilla Marketing,
Hmm.
like spelled GUE, and it
Yeah.
was really about today they call it, the hustle. You got to hustle to make it happen. And so that work ethic of today, everybody's kind of hidden behind a computer. So there's an intro before this for the audio, but for those that are going to watch on YouTube and watch it on the video, you have a gym. I think you've been a gym owner for quite a while. You have an online business, and you've also co-authored two books or more than two
Hmm.
books
Two.
with
Yeah.
Mark, right? Or both those
Yeah.
books with Mark Rippetoe, and they
Uh,
have sold
yeah.
like
Yeah, a bazillion. Yeah, we did. He was Rippetoe was the author of Starting Strength, which is kind of the
yes,
flagship title of the
yep.
whole organization. And then I co-authored the follow-up book to that, which was Practical
Practical
Programming for
programming.
Strength Training. Yeah, so Starting Strength is the lifts, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, power clean, all that stuff. It's kind of the mechanics of how to do that and how to set up beginners programming. And then Practical Programming was kind of um, our take on how to get into that next level, kind of intermediate and more advanced level barbell training. And then we did a few years after that, we did it wasn't with Mark, it was me and guy Dr. Jonathan Sullivan.
Yes.
Rip commissioned us to do a book called the Barbell Prescription, and that was basically kind of distilling everything from Starting Strength and Practical Programming for like an over 40 over 50 crowd,
Which is
on
a
up into their 80s. So
right, which is such a massive growing population now.
mhm.
And by the way, the books are not small. It's not like some
Yeah.
people put out books today, and I'm like, did they fucking write this in like 30 minutes? Like, why? You guys like really put in it, and you're with your co-author is a medical doctor and strength coach.
Yeah, Dr. Jonathan Sullivan he's an amazing guy, and he definitely was not going to let me get away with writing a fluff piece of a book. When you write for guys that are MDs and also also a PhD, very very detailed. I'm kind of the personality where I'm like, you know, done is better than perfect type. So I fly
Yes.
through stuff, but like he really really challenged me to work and get everything, really, really right. And, he did the first half of the book, which is kind of the why, and
Hmm.
explaining it from the perspective of a medical doctor. Why should older people, basically your mom and your grandparents or whatever, why should they consider picking up a barbell? And then my section was the second half of the book, which was kind of the how, because that was where my experience was actually in the gym with this population, which is, certain considerations, programming and otherwise for an older population.
It's such an interesting thought that come to my mind because, your co-author, Dr. Jonathan, what's his last name?
Sullivan.
Dr. Jonathan Sullivan. I've seen his YouTube videos. I feel like the medical community is missing that aspect of understanding the importance of strength so much to the point where, for example, I just got an email from a mom an hour ago. Hey, so and so injured his wrist playing football. He's going to be out for a while. And very likely, sometimes parents come to that conclusion. Other times they go to get an x-ray and the doctor says, you injured your wrist. Don't do anything. Yet, really, what I'm guaranteed Dr. Sullivan would say, all right, your wrist is injured, but you could probably do body weight squats and you could probably find exercises that don't bother your wrist. Maybe pressing movements hurt, but maybe you could do some light farmer walks, or you could squat with a safety bar or a belt squat.
Yeah.
But here we have doctors telling people, do nothing. And kind of the flip side to that, Donnie Thompson said something to me, I don't know, through text message a few months ago. He said, what did the farmer, or what does a farmer do when they injure their back? They can't go on the couch and collect unemployment. They actually have to get back in the tractor, move it around their farm, get out, move a stone, and they actually have to move themselves back into health. And I guess that's why they're saying the kids of today, we will live the kids of today. I don't know if we'll outlive them, but here you and I think are about the same age. I'm 47.
Yeah. I'm 41.
41. Kids can't, there's varsity athletes that can't do one good push-up if
Yeah,
they.
no, I know. And I feel you with the doctors, although I feel like it's changing to a degree, especially with the older population. And I think it's been driven largely, from the bottom up. It hasn't been the medical community, from the top down deciding this. It's been, I think, the observation from doctors, because there's more older people than ever engaged in strength training, that wow, there is a difference between a 75-year-old person that lifts weights and one that doesn't. Where I think, and it's like in a lot of things, the old guard has to just move on. It's like that in the military. Before paradigms change in the military or any big bureaucracy, the old guard kind of has to move on and be replaced with a new generation who has more buy-in to what we're doing. But to your point, in terms of whether it's an injury, what we would say, and I think we said it in our book somewhere, is you can't let things heal. You have to make things heal.
I love that.
And that's not being stupid and bullheaded, and ignoring injuries and making them worse. But movement is good. And I think, like you said, when you're injured, you should do everything that you can, to work around that. And the more that you can do, generally, the faster that people heal. And as most people will tell you, as you get older, I mean, even at our age, we probably notice that, it's pretty rare that a day goes by where you feel just great in the gym, especially while you're warming up. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah.
there's always a little something there, but you just kind of, almost all of that stuff goes away with a few good warm up sets. And by the end of the workout, most of it's gone. Well, that's only going to get worse as you age. By the time you're 65, 75, 80 years old, something's always going to be wrong to a degree. And if you wait to wake up and feel 100% healthy with no nagging aches and pains, or no, you're never going to train. And so that part of it is those little aches and pains and that sort of thing is going to be there whether we train or not. So you might as well be strong with some aches and
Yes.
pains versus weak.
I'm like, as we're speaking about this, I'm like wondering to myself, I wonder how somebody who's like 60-year-old or our age feels who doesn't do strength training. Maybe they don't have these kind of like bumps and bruises, but from conversations, and you train more of this older population than I do, They probably just talking about low energy levels. Their back hurts, even though they haven't done something to hurt their back. So I want to, before we like dive deeper, can you take the listeners kind of back to your early day? Where was your start in strength and conditioning? Because we've got that 20 plus years of coaching under our belt. So what was your start or where?
Well, professionally or me personally?
Yeah,
I mean,
coaching. Where did that,
coaching,
or how did it start? However you want to get into it is good.
I wanted to do that from of probably from from high school age on. I knew that I wanted something to do with the strength and conditioning or fitness field. Wasn't exactly sure what that would look like. I took my first job, my first internship when I was 19 years old, coaching high school athletes that I had been teammates with like 2 years before. Like when I was a senior, they were sophomores and stuff. And I
Yeah.
went back and I got an opportunity to intern in my hometown. And so I jumped on that. That was, of course, I didn't know what I was doing, but through Texas A&M, I was able to get my first internship there at 19 years old. And then, I really got into it, um, you know, you know, dove in headlong when I got out of the Marine Corps in 2007. I moved back home, after I got out of the service, and like a lot of people do, picked up a few jobs as a personal trainer at kind of Globo gyms, and from a very early on in that, I knew that that wasn't for me. That Globo gym type environment. But at the time, that's kind of what you did. If you're going to work in the fitness industry, you were going to be a personal trainer at a Globo gym. The little small training gyms and all that weren't quite what they are now, in terms of the number of them. But I had a small gym that I was working at, and that I kind of liked. But what happened with me is I showed up, one day. It was a Saturday, and I showed up at like 9 a.m. for a training session, and there were chains on the door.
Oh,
And yeah, and I called my boss at the time. I remember standing in the parking lot, and I had a client there with me waiting. And I called my boss, and I was like, "Hey," I was like, what's going on? There's chains on the door." And he was like, "Yeah, sorry, man, we're finished. Like, no more money left to pay." I had no idea like that this is where the gym was at. I was just a trainer working there.
yeah.
So I was left now kind of without a job, and my wife was pregnant at the time.
Oh,
And so I went home, and I was like, well, I've been talking about starting a gym. Like, I was like, let's do it. I was like, now's the time. And so I pulled the trigger on that, man. I started really, really small. I started in like, I want to say my first gym was like like 800 square feet, and I didn't want to use debt. I used all cash. I just bought some cheap equipment, a cheap power rack, cheap dumbbells,
where did
but
you and for what kind of, were you in like a strip plaza? Did you rent like a garage or something?
no, it was actually like a kind of a like
Retail?
a retail strip center, but it wasn't a real high end one, so I was
Gotcha.
able to afford that small space, and try to do everything with the little bit of cash that I had saved up. And I learned pretty early on that your real value is not in the equipment that you have. It's your ability to use what you have. And that was one of the lessons that I learned of working for a small gym that went under fairly quickly. Was they started with way too much debt and way too much overhead. And so when I opened my space, I wasn't going to make that same mistake. So I wasn't afraid to start small and start cheap. I realized pretty quick nobody cared what brand of barbell I had or what brand of rack that I
I
had and all
know.
that. So cheap Craigslist stuff was fine at the time as long as it's clean and it works.
So,
And that was
so funny.
and as I've evolved, since then I've replaced the older stuff with better things. But even now a lot of my racks and stuff are 10 or 12 years old.
Where did
You know,
you in 2000, when did you open the first location? Oh 08?
it would have been the end of '07. Yeah,
Okay,
end of
so
'07,
like
beginning of '08.
Rogue Fitness wasn't really out yet, not that I know of,
Mm-mm.
but like I think Again Faster, Elite FTS. Do you remember where you
Um,
bought your equipment, or did
I
Craigslist?
bought I bought a lot of it was used. Some of the new stuff I bought like some little odds and ends from Perform Better.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and then that was kind of my first phase. Was like all the heavy duty stuff was mostly um was mostly used stuff off Craigslist. All the
Texas is known for powerlifting and like, the Texas method and all that
Right.
stuff. What's interesting, Andy, you said like the people don't care about the equipment. Here we are, we're like, oh, I need this rack and I need that. Um, I was watching a coach. I don't want to like give it away, because I'm talking kind of bad about him, but I was watching this guy train. He's a coach at a very busy fitness center where he's a coach. And he was doing like deadlifts and pulling from the ground. And every rep, his back was like hunched over. And I was like, oh man, he's going to kill his back. And I didn't know he was a coach. And now I found out he was a coach. And here I am. I'm always like, so strict with my coaching, like, look how we pick up the weight, look how we put it down, this is the technique. And here's a coach who doesn't know how to train himself, but he's in a place that's packed. And forget the equipment, I think people just want to be around people they like, even if you're going to blow out their back, I guess. Like, just like the whole time I was thinking to myself, I'm so dialed in with coaching. This guy doesn't even know he's doing it wrong. I don't even imagine what it is when he's coaching. It's a little bit heartbreaking, but it's also just like the reality of it.
It's the reality of it. I mean, people pay money for coaching for different reasons, and like you said, a lot of them don't necessarily know if you're coaching something wrong.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have the knowledge to evaluate your own skills. So by and large, they might be paying for, in some parts, personality and all that. Now, I
Yes.
think over time, your ability as a coach, it's definitely going to pay off in the long term to be a good coach, because if you're bad enough, you are going to, chronically injure people. And that if you want to empty out your gym as quickly as possible, have a high injury rate.
That is funny.
That's the one thing that will, that will, one of the one things that will kill your business. And so, I think long term it pays. But yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. That the reality is that if you've got a great personality, great marketing, and you're good at relationships, and you've got a decent facility, I mean, you can make money even if you're not a great coach.
You
And
totally can. I
yeah,
think I'm maybe my expectations and my coaching is too tough, and it scares people off. They'd rather be in a place that's kind of just having fun and nobody gives a shit like how much you squat. And I hate to tell you, like, it's so heartbreaking because I'm like, man, if I could suck a little bit, maybe everything, I'd be like double the membership. But I believe that, I want to train kids that want to win. I want to build champions. So I stayed the course. So how long were you in the little 800 square foot? What kind of lease did you sign?
I signed a 3-year lease to start with.
Oh, wow.
I outgrew the place in 2 years. I was ready to move, and so
How
I
many people did it take to outgrow that?
man, I'm trying to remember. I want to say I had maybe 30, full time training clients,
Like
something like
one on
that.
one, or you did small groups?
I started with one on one because I really didn't know any better.
Right.
That was kind of what I was doing at the commercial gyms. You find out pretty quick when you open a facility that there's no that the one-on-one personal training is a dead end road as your primary business model. And so you just run out of hours in the day,
Right.
and you can only charge so much per session for a single person. Um, and so I very quickly got on board with you got to train, you got to learn how to train small group, semi-private type of workouts. That was the real sweet spot.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it, was that I was and some of it, you just, it's like you don't necessarily plan on that. It's just like you're training a lady and she's like, hey, my husband wants to start, can he come train with me? Okay, well, yeah, you're going to say yeah. So now it's like, okay, now I got to train too. And then during the summertime, they're like, hey, my daughter plays volleyball at the high school, can she come train with us? And it's like, okay, yeah, bring her along. So now you learn how to train 3 people at a time.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily something that I actually set out to do. It was something that I kind of accidentally did right. And I remember like our mutual friend with Ryan, of him doing something. And he's like, if I had it to do over again as a trainer, I would only do small group, semi-private training. And because that model has the potential to make the most. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'm already doing that. That was like the one thing I was doing right, early on. And
Do you
so,
did
so
you
doing,
have his oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just saying, so doing that, I outgrew that space pretty quick. And so when I was ready to move, I moved to another shopping center of just a couple miles down the road.
Was
And
it
that,
hard to exit the lease since it was early?
well, so here's the deal. So the new landlord that I talked to, I told him he had a spot that he was trying to get rid of, or he was trying to rent out. And he said, look, he said, you come in here. And he says, I can't remember what the math was exactly, but basically for the first year, the full rate, he deducted the difference of what I was paying in rent at the old place in order for me. Does that make sense?
Say that again. I guess I'm not that smart.
I'm trying to figure out a way to say it that makes sense. But let's say I don't remember what I was actually paying, but let's say I was paying $1,000 a month at the old place,
Yeah.
and the new place was $2,000 a month.
Mhm.
Well, he only charged me $1,000 a month for that first year,
Why? Because you were still paying the rent.
so I could
That guy
still pay.
wouldn't let you leave the first spot.
No,
Did
I
you
mean, I
try
had
to get like a an attorney to do
no,
that?
no. I mean,
Wow.
it's basically it wasn't worth it, because the deal that the new landlord offered me, it was like I
Same
can leave at,
price.
yeah, same price. It was two checks, but it was the same price. I could leave here, no hard feelings,
What a great
you know.
landlord.
And yeah, and it was really rare. But it was a unique opportunity that I got. So I was able to leave early without actually having to break my lease and pay an attorney. And,
How big was the new spot?
the new spot I moved into was about 1,500 square feet, 1,400 square feet.
Yep.
So not
That's
a lot bigger, but it was arranged better too.
yeah.
Um, and then
It
I was
doesn't
there.
sound big, but it does make that 500 square feet makes a significant difference.
It makes a significant difference. And then I did that for 10 years. I was in 1,500 square feet, and I just, I tried
Did
to
you
milk that.
buy, or did you consider buying the not the building, but the space?
Man, I've looked all over, like where I'm at in Kingwood, because that's always been kind of the part of the plan.
Mhm.
And we just don't have real estate here that, locally, that would work, as far as a build. Everything's strip center type stuff. There's very few standalone buildings type of things that would
Gotcha.
be affordable. So, I'm just not in the market of trying to purchase a, gigantic retail strip center, that
in,
sort of thing.
in
So
Texas, is it like I'm not sure what's the like major city you're part of? Houston or
I'm about 30 minutes north of Houston.
is it doable to have like uh a barn on your property with like where no.
Not in here, because we're a pretty tightly controlled suburb,
Yeah,
of Houston. So there's like there's industrial space, but that's like it's like a good 20 minutes away. And I just, for the market that I was training, a more affluent older client, like an industrial space, and like Houston gets hot as fuck. So like, trying to train that market in a sweat box or whatever was
you
not
have
going to
to have
work.
air conditioning, right?
You have to have air conditioning if you're going to train. I mean, even if you're training a super hardcore population or whatever, yeah, you think you're
It
hardcore until you're
I've been to
training.
Austin
Yeah.
and in April and it was like 92 to 94 degrees. And the cab driver, that's how long ago it was. There was no Uber. Both guys, I was in a cab twice, they both forgot to run the meter. And I was like, man, are these guys like fried out from the heat? And they told me, like, yeah, dude, it's not odd to have 100 days in a row of right over 100 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And the back when I was going to Austin, which was like 2012, nah, it may have been like 2010, 2012, the culture of CrossFit was exploding. I mean, it
Yeah.
was everywhere. You were never a CrossFit, were you?
So I actually, the first year or two I was open, I got, that was because CrossFit was booming when I was in the military. That's when, because
Yes.
I was in the military 03 to '07. So like that '05 to '07 time frame, that's CrossFit was like exploding in the military.
I liked
Um,
CrossFit back then.
I did too.
I
It was
thought it
awesome.
was,
Well, it
you
was
know,
underground. It was raw. It was like, you know
and
what
it
I mean?
wasn't, yeah, it
It
wasn't, I don't think, so out of control, meaning like it would be something like, squat for 7 by 7 and then do 7 sets of 7 swings and pull-ups, which is like, that's a good, like, strength endurance type training session. But then it became like, I don't know, fucking, 100 back extensions, 100 sit-ups, 100 pull-ups, 100 feet of handstand walk. And I was like, who is this for? It just got so out of control.
Yeah. And I think and I just realized early on, like it wasn't really, for the demographic that was coming to me. Sometimes you set out and you plot a course and you say, this is who I want to train. I think
Right.
that's a large part, like what you did. Like, this is who I want to train. These are the
Yes.
athletes I want to, and sometimes you take what is, what is coming to you. In other words, I fish, and sometimes you're targeting a certain species and
Yeah.
sometimes a certain species is biting. You know what I mean? And it's like a certain species was biting for me, hot and heavy at the time. So I took advantage of that, and
Who was coming? Like,
just
how were people finding about you? Were you on like a road where people could see you?
yeah, and I
Foot
think just word
traffic?
of, word of mouth, because I opened my studio at timing is everything, right? And at the time there was like two big Globo gyms and nothing else. So the idea that this small little private gym, um, that specialized strictly in personal training, it
Yeah.
just it saw it was a niche
Yeah.
that needed to be filled, and I filled it at the right time. I didn't, like I said, it's just kind of happenstance timing, but I opened my gym at the right time where there was a huge vacuum in that market that needed to be filled. And so, at the time you're trying to pay your bills. I didn't really care if it was an 80-year-old lady or a 16-year-old kid or a power
Yeah.
lifter or whatever that came into my gym. If they wanted to get stronger, then I wanted to train them. And so you train who came in and who stuck around. I originally opened the gym, and the name of the gym when I opened was Kingwood Strength and Conditioning.
Hmm.
And I originally opened kind of like you with the idea that I wanted to train mainly high school athletes, high school and
Right.
college athletes. And I did, I would say, almost all primarily that, like my first year that I was open. But within a year I was training just as many of those kids' parents and grandparents, and as I was the athletes.
That's
And eventually the
interesting.
the, the older population just took over. And what I realized was that, from a client standpoint, yeah, they weren't as fun to train necessarily as the high school kids, but they weren't seasonal. They didn't need to train late in the afternoon, which
It's a
when I
better
started,
business model. It
yeah, and
really is.
I'm kind of a morning guy. I like to get in there at like 5 a.m. and I go till, I go hard until like middle of the day. That's that's the kids are in school, you
I
know.
kind of, you know what? Like, I'm like that now too. When I opened my first location, I would coach from actually 5 to 8 p.m. because I'd get out of school. I was teaching. I'd get out at 3:45, but every Tuesday or 3 out of 4 Tuesdays, we had a faculty meeting. So I wouldn't get out till 4:30, 4:40. So I went 5 to 8 p.m. And then I did my own training from 8 to 9. I don't even have I don't even want to think about training at 8 p.m. I'm crushed by
Yeah,
8
no, I'm the
p.m.
same way. And for many years, many years, really, I'd say probably for at least the first 10 or 12, but probably longer than that, where I really burn the candles at both end in terms of, like a lot of trainers do. You work that split shift. You're at your gym at
It's
5
very
a.m.
hard.
You work till 11 or 12 or whatever, and then there's kind of that dead time between like noon and 3 or
Mhm.
something like. And then school lets out, and the athletes start coming in around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you can take that up until 6 or 7 or so, and then you've got more after work people that want to come in. So you're training, and people go, oh, that's so awesome, like you have the middle of the day off. And it's like, no, it sucks. It's like going to work twice in one day. And so
It
I'm
is
kind of
very
like,
hard,
it's tough. And
emotionally and physically.
I did that for a long time, and eventually I just had to make the decision. And that's where the online business really helped. I had to make the decision that I'm only going to be in my gym for half of a day, and that's either going to be the first half or the latter half.
Right.
And I decided on the, partly because I have kids, and so I work when they're in school, and then by the time they get home in the afternoons and stuff, then I may still be working here on my computer or whatever, but I'm home. And I
Yeah.
have a lot more flexibility to arrange things in the afternoon, if I need to do this whenever, but I can still have that time, to be home with the kids or whatever. And
Yeah,
so,
the online business, and we're going to get into that. The online business is what gives us freedom. Did you hire an assistant coach, Andy, at the when you were trying to trying to like be just in the mornings? And somebody
So
could take over the afternoon.
yeah, so several years ago, yeah, I went through. I'm sure, like probably you have been too. I've been through several trainers.
Sure.
So a lot of them didn't work out. Some of it my fault. Some of it theirs. But that's neither here nor
Yes.
there. But I had several years after I opened my original facility, and I did well. Then obviously, on the tail end of that, there were competitors that started opening up. Right. So
Yes.
I was the first, but then there was a lot of little small personal training type of facilities that started opening up around town, which was fine. I mean, there's plenty of business to go around. So, but probably one of my most successful competitors, they were open for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. And
Oh,
I knew one of the guys. I had known him. We had met a few times and we were friendly and on good terms or whatever. And then I drove by their facility one day and I saw that they were closed like permanently. Like the lights were off, the equipment was gone.
yes.
They just gone out of it. Yeah,
Victory.
yeah, yeah. So, but at victory,
Just kidding.
but also opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And so I called him and I said, hey, I saw that y'all, you know, some, I didn't ask him the details or whatever, but I just said, hey, are you by any chance looking for a place to train your clients? What are you doing? He's like, yeah, actually I am. He said, my business partner pulled out, like he's done. He's out of the industry, but he's like, he had a bunch of clients, like 20 or 25 clients, that he didn't have a home for at the time. And he was trying to, and I was like, hey, well, I got a deal for you.
Yeah.
So we
What
got
was
together.
your, do you want to share how you kind of did that? Because
it's
I,
it's it's a super easy arrangement. He's not an employee.
yeah.
It's a rental arrangement. He's renting the gym from me from I'm done at 11. He comes in at 11 a.m. or whenever he wants to after that. But basically the gym is his from 11 a.m. on.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm in there hot and heavy from like 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. And the gym's mine during that time because I run small groups. So I don't really have room in there for another trainer, doing his thing as well. So, but I rent the gym out to him in the afternoons. And the deal is that I don't there's pros and cons of a rental arrangement with another trainer. You probably make less
Hmm.
off of that trainer versus as if he were an employee, but you
Yes.
eliminate the hassle factor. I don't have to keep up with how many sessions is he training, what is he charging, did a client of his cancel, or
Yeah.
what, like that's all. He runs his own shit. The benefit for me is that I have a steady rental coming in from him, which basically just reduces my overhead. That's how I calculate it, as he has effectively cut my overhead almost in half. And it's very low hassle for me. And I don't necessarily have to worry about him walking because he's already been a gym owner and he knows what a sweet deal he has. And he knows for a fact, as we talked about it, he'll make more training his clients in the way that he's doing, paying a what is a nominal overhead and rent than he will opening up his own facility. And I think there's always that thing where when you hire a young trainer, for sure, if they're good, they always think they'll make more if they open up their own facility. And
Especially if
maybe,
they are entrepreneurial. It's hard to, I had a guy who, interned, became a coach, was very entrepreneurial. I let him start kind of his own like sub business. And then he went and opened his own business. He was an entrepreneur. I wouldn't be able to stop him. My plan was to partner with him on the gym, but an entrepreneur wants their own thing.
yeah.
Or it's interesting. Guys like us are just like, I don't want the headache. I want a coach. I want this kind of stability. And I think maybe that happens as we get quote unquote older, the way
Well,
we want to.
we also have this other stream of income that we're pursuing with the online stuff. So now I'm able to coach
When
my
did you
clients at
start the online? How,
Um,
what
it,
year?
you know, it wasn't long after I hooked up with Rippetoe, because after I wrote the book with him,
How did
then
that all start, by the way? Like your meeting with Mark? Because I know, and by the way, like, I know some people who like Jim Wendler, when Jim did years ago the podcast with Mark, when he'd have people in person, um, Jim had Starting Strength. He's like, this is the best book I've ever read. I was like, really? All right, I'll read it. And so I just heard like Mark is this simple man, but he really is crushing it with business. How did your introduction to Mark happen?
so he was that was when, I don't know if, I don't follow CrossFit anymore, but I know, in the early days they
That's
had this,
right.
the subject matter experts, right?
He
Remember
was the
they had like
barbell.
they had like the
Yeah.
jump rope guy. What was his
I
name?
was there, Buddy
Yeah,
Lee.
Buddy Lee, and they brought in all these people as like, which I thought was a cool idea.
Jeff Martone for kettlebells.
Yeah, and they had Mike Bergener was the Olympic weightlifting
Olympic,
guy,
yes.
and then they brought in I think, I don't remember if Mark was before or after Dave Tate, but Dave did it for a little while and then Mark did it.
They
But
tried to get Dave, and then Dave was really felt like there could be a lot of backlash from the powerlifting community to jump in on CrossFit, because CrossFit had a lot of haters back then.
oh yeah,
So
and that's what
yeah.
and Rippetoe's thing was like, he wasn't coaching powerlifting, he was coaching the barbell lifts, which
Right.
which he'll tell you it's two different things. It's
Yes.
obviously a lot of overlap, but a little bit different. So he was the subject matter expert for the squat, the slow lifts, the squat, the bench, the overhead press, and the deadlift.
Mhm.
And so, I was obviously watching CrossFit stuff like that, and I said, who is this guy? Mark Rippetoe, and I knew he was from Texas, and so was I. So that immediately gives you a connection when
Yes.
when you're both from Texas. So and then he was a forum moderator. This was back before social media, so when forums were the big deal, right? There was this,
Oh man, I
there
have
was
so
this
many memories. That's why I'm laughing.
Oh, I know. They were great. And he was a moderator on this obscure forum called Strength Mill. It was like
Oh my God, I remember it.
strengthmill.net. And
Yes.
it was actually him and Louis Simmons. And Louis would answer a forum post like once every 2 months or something. But Rip was on there all the time.
Yeah.
And so people started to find their way to Strength Mill. Um, and he
Those
got to be
forums were just so cool
yeah,
because
and
there was
Rip was
depth. There was a
yeah,
lot
there
of
was
depth
depth.
to it.
And if you got an answer that the answer stayed there, unlike like Facebook, you give a great answer to a question and
Or
6 hours later it's
the
gone.
algorithm. Yes. And so then, for people that don't understand it, like what Andy's saying, if somebody was like, and we're gonna get into this, like, hey, what are your thoughts on the difference of 5x5 from what Reg Park did versus Bill Starr? People would start like answering, but then somebody would take a photo of a book and put it in there, and the thread would go on and on. And so you would go down the rabbit hole, and I believe it made you much smarter.
Sure.
Whereas if you're on Instagram, you are going 5 seconds. And so sometimes when I put something on Instagram, I preface it and say, for those of you who could last more than 5 seconds. And it's
Yeah.
kind of sad. I think that's why coaches, you know, pre 2010, you were forced to read, and reading
Yeah.
made you think.
And
Strength mill.
and yeah, and so it was Rip on there, and I got so I was on there too. And what was happening was, at the same time that Starting Strength got big, Rip's book, and it got
Yes.
big because of the promotion of CrossFit. I was at the same time, I had opened my gym and I was using the Starting Strength book in my gym. And so, as far as Rip knew, that it was like him using his methodologies up in Wichita Falls, and there was me using it down in Houston. And so we started communicating, especially on a lot of this intermediate level stuff. So like the novice program, the Starting Strength novice program, like people knew about, but a lot of the more obscure kind of intermediate programming stuff that was in the original versions of practical programming, like I was implementing that with a lot of people at my gym.
Can you
And
break it down a little bit so people have context?
well,
The
like
intermediate.
like let's say like the Texas method. So like
Yes.
there's in the Starting Strength world, there's the novice program, and then you kind of graduate from that or whatever, and you go into intermediate level training, which is just slightly more complex, slightly more advanced level training. There's like little elements of periodization and that bit too. It's not overly complex, but it's a little bit more complex than just like simple linear type progression. And I was using a lot of that with people. So like an example, the most famous example would be the Texas method. That's the one that everybody knows. But there's other examples in that book of intermediate type programming. And I think so that, when you write a program for somebody, if you use it with 10 people, you learn something. If you use it with 100 people, you learn a little more. If you use it with 1,000 people, you learn a lot more. So, and the more you learn, the more you refine, and the more that the program evolves, and the better it gets.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what happened. And me and him were communicating about this all throughout. And so we did this over years of him training people and me training people. And he said, that there had been 2 editions of practical programming that had already been published. And he said, hey, I want to do a complete rewrite of practical programming. He says, we've been doing this now for a long time. So much has changed of what of what we've learned and what we understand about these programs. He goes, I want to do a whole rewrite of it. And I want you to co-author it, because he says, I think what he told me was that he thought I had almost a better grasp of some of the stuff than he did. And he'll tell you, he really doesn't care about programming. Like, that's not his thing. His passion is in the mechanics of the lifts. That he really has a strong passion for that, of how to execute the lifts properly. And he's
It's
put,
interesting.
now I tell people this all the time. You can agree or disagree with Mark's analysis of about these lifts, but you cannot knock the amount of analysis he's put into it, and the amount of thought that he's put into the execution of these lifts and how to do them correctly. And I don't know of anybody that's put as much thought as he has into the mechanics
He
of the
would have
lifts.
been very upset with the coach I saw doing everything with a round back.
Yeah, I
Who's
mean,
at a pumping gym.
yeah, or just saying stuff that doesn't make sense, or not critically examining your own statements or whatever. And so
That's
Rip,
interesting.
he brought me in to write practical programming, and so we did. And I guess it was probably around a year-long process. It was a pretty lengthy thing. Rip's if you know Rip, he's a special guy. He's different, and so you had to kind of get used to working with him. And kind of get on his clock, because he'd call me at like 12:30 at night and be like,
Dude,
hey,
my buddy
Baker,
John Weld
yeah,
said like he'd go there and that's when they would lift at like midnight. He's like, then
yeah,
we're out to eat at 3 a.m. He's like, we're fucking squatting at 1:30. It's like I'm used to
yeah.
like being in bed for 4 hours at this
Yeah,
time.
me too. And so I was on a different clock than him. So I had to tell him, like, hey, I still got to get up at like 5 a.m. and go train clients. So like
Right.
but we figured it all out, and it was good. And we became good friends in the process. And but after that, then it kind of put my name out there in that community a little bit. And so I started getting more people, emailing me and that sort of stuff, and wanting me to write programs for them or whatever. And it just came as like, okay, this is an opportunity that I have now to service a wider audience. And so I had the thing at my gym going, but then I also started growing this, online training business, and I had to kind of formalize it. And it's grown now to a certain point to where I can work half a day at the gym and then come home and work the other half of the day on the online business.
That's what Ryan Lee, his in the 6-figure trainer, is. He said exactly what you said earlier, Andy, is he goes, most coaches, they just burn out because they train from like 5 a.m. until 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And then they come back in the afternoon. And back when he was doing it, it was really, strength and conditioning or strength coaches was a new word. So it was personal training. Everybody expected it to be one-on-one. Something I sometimes forget about is in my early years, I used to go to people's house and coach them, and they'd all have like a physio ball and like a couple dumbbells or a light set of power blocks. Power blocks have been around. I remember training people from 8 to 9 at night. And then
Yeah.
I would go. So I remember I was teaching at a junior college, an exercise class. Then I'd go to these people's houses, 7 to 8, another person, 8 to 9. Then I'd go to the commercial gym to lift from like 9 to 10, 15. I don't know how I did it, dude. That's
Yeah.
insane.
I don't either. When I look back at it now, it's
What
like
the hell?
the schedule that I used to run, and I would cram in, if I had 2 or 3 hours off, in the middle of the day between my morning shift and my afternoon shift. At the time I was competing in powerlifting, and I would do a full, squat, bench, deadlift workout, grab a quick shower, and get right back to coaching people. Now it's like, there's no way, I could do that anymore. And so
The energy of a
yeah, and
young man.
exactly. And so I don't have any energy now. No, I'm just kidding. But I do enjoy
It's
both.
consolidated energy.
Yeah. And, I don't know, during COVID when, we weren't, I don't know how locked down you guys were. Like, I mean, my gym, I locked it down for a month, and then it became quickly apparent after that that, where I was going back to work. I
Yeah,
was not
we
gonna. I
were
was
shut down for 3 months, but after the 3 months, we were allowed outside. Then it rained one day. So I was like, all right, we're training inside. And then I was like, we could just do whatever the fuck we want to do as long
Yeah.
as nobody's watching. Yeah, New Jersey was very strict. And now looking back at everything, it's like, God, what a joke.
Yeah, I know. And so, but during that time, that was the first time in years where I didn't coach in person for like a month. And
Yep.
so, of course, like everybody, we didn't really know that first couple months, you didn't really know what was going to happen, and your income went way down. But all the thing is all the other trainers in the world that were strictly brick and mortar trainers,
They were
they were
screwed.
they were scrambling trying to set
Yes.
up online coaching. I already had it set
What
up. So
what were
all
you
I had to do was,
using to like any software or technology? What did you use?
well, I have I've got I've had a website, andybaker.com, that I've had
Yep.
for a long time. And that's kind of my hub.
You
And
have the training courses on there.
yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, I sell training templates off there. I've got online group programming, affordable group programming type stuff. And I've got, access for, if people want to hire me for more like one-on-one individualized coaching. So I had a hub there for an online business already established. So all I had to do was kind of ramp that up a little bit.
I
So
did the same.
I didn't have to start from scratch, which is where a lot of trainers were, because it's like anything, they weren't diversified in their income streams.
Thank God for
Um,
Ryan Lee.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. And the other part of that though, now that I see is, and this is kind of me being a pessimist, but there's a part of me sometimes that goes, I could probably sell the gym, in a couple of years when my lease is up, and I could get away from the 5 a.m. coaching, and I could get away from that, and I could just go 100, fully online and work when and where I want and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, you're leaving yourself kind of at the mercy of unforeseen circumstances when you do that, because look at like this, we don't know what's going to happen with chat GPT and all this other AI that's coming down the pipeline. We don't know what the landscape is going to look like in the online training world. And I'm kind of a dinosaur when it comes to technology, so I pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Right.
I fucking hate social media. I really do. And I wouldn't do
Too.
it
I'm gonna
if it
burn the internet down, by the way. I'm gonna
yeah,
burn the internet. That's
yeah.
what
I
I
mean,
tell people.
if I didn't, that the trainer that rents space for me, I really admire him in a lot of ways. He doesn't have a website. He doesn't have an Instagram account. He doesn't have
How old is
Facebook.
he?
He's my age. He doesn't do shit. He's a good trainer, and he gets all of his business through word of mouth. But he's been here in town for 20 years, like I have. So, he's got a business, like literally business cards with his email address on there, and in a way, I admire that. It does limit what he can make, I think,
Right.
income wise, but just not having to have all that in a lot of ways sounds appealing. Um, but it is what it is. If you're gonna be in the online world, you have to have a way to get your stuff out there.
Yeah.
But it does get tiresome sometimes to always have to film and all that kind of stuff. And but at, I think it's a good idea for a lot of trainers to start from the beginning, at least thinking about diversifying their services and
I did
having.
it from day one because
Yeah.
I got lucky. Well, I came across Ryan's stuff. I purchased his 6-figure trainer, and then it was a follow along, like it was a DVD,
Mm-hmm.
CDs with workbook. And so I remember sitting at my desk playing the CD, and then it was like, now go to this place to build your website. I'd hit pause, I'd buy it, and I would build the website. I mean, he really set us up. And it's interesting to see that a lot of people from that era, they kind of bailed out from the fitness world because, kind of like what you're saying, around that 2014, 2015, maybe even earlier, when videography took off and the complexity, it really challenged guys like us who were not 20 years old, who grew up with phones in our hands. It really made it tricky. And going back, I forgot about this, Andy. This shit is so funny. Did you get Ryan's program, Strength Coach MBA?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I think I got
dude,
all of its programs at one time.
at the end of he does like 10 audio interviews with Dwayne Carlisle. And Dwayne is, Dwayne was like one of the first speed coaches doing
Right.
speed and agility. Dwayne is out in that San Francisco area. What do they call that area? Like with all the tech people.
The
Um,
Silicon Valley.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's Silicon Valley. He was with the 49ers. And then when he left or they released him, I'm not sure, he opened his own place. And anyway, he interviews Dwayne on starting the business, running speed camps, all this stuff. And it's like the 10th and final bonus CD, 11th CD. And he's like, what would you do differently? And Dwayne has this way of speaking where he's got like this monotone voice and he pauses. He's like, Ryan, this is what I would do. He's just listening. I wouldn't own a gym. And Ryan's like, oh my God. And deep down, I'm like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And then he says, like, all he would do is run speed camps or partner with high schools to do speed and agility. He's like, I wouldn't use any equipment, minus I would take like a little gym bag with a bunch of cones and I would hire another high school kid to be my assistant. And I'm like, oh my God, like this guy had multiple large gyms. I mean, he had turf in his gym. We're talking in the late 90s. I mean, finding somebody to teach you weightlifting, not powerlifting, Olympic, people call it Olympic lifting, weightlifting in the early 2000s, or finding bumper plates was like you found, like
Right.
you found God. I remember I helped Mike Mahler organize a seminar in New York. He was going to do, or he did the kettlebells, and he was going to co-teach with Christian Thibodeau, and Christian was going to teach weightlifting. And it was the year 2003, maybe 2004. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to learn how to do a power clean. There was no
Yeah.
YouTube. And then Christian Thibodeau doesn't even show up.
Oh, geez.
He cancels. He cancels, but Mike is there. And I was like, oh my God, I need to learn how to do Olympic lifting. And it's just funny how we viewed information back then. Like we really cherished it compared to now. But my God, that final bonus CD where Dwayne Carlisle just has you hanging on to his words. He says he wouldn't own a gym.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some days I feel like that too. I
Right.
think, what am I doing? Just, Thomas Plummer has said, I don't know if you follow like a lot of his stuff. He's like, some days you just want to like get under your desk and just burn this fucker to the ground.
I
And it's
say it
like,
all the time. I say I'll burn
there's,
Instagram to the ground.
yeah, I mean, and I go back and forth, like, kind of with the, the online versus, and I think if I'm honest, I feel like if I had to do either full time, I probably would miss the other one. So I'm probably just as good kind of keeping it
This
diversified like
gets
I do.
spending excess time behind the computer to me becomes stressful. So I'm
Yeah.
here in my, people are like, oh, is that a backdrop? My office has these bricks and whiteboards and books everywhere. But when I'm working here, after like 2 to 3 hours, I'm like, get me the fuck out of my basement. I go nuts. I need to,
Yeah. That
there's
was
no
one thing.
sun coming in.
Yeah, during COVID, I think that was a blessing in disguise, was that because I was spending basically all day staring at a computer trying to figure out, ramping up my social media, filming videos, writing
Yeah.
more articles, all the stuff that you do to try to generate income from the online business. You're doing that all day long. And after a month of that, when I went back to work, like with my clients, and I remember thinking, like, I'm going to keep doing this because I don't want to do that. What I just did for a month, I don't want to do that as my full-time
I think that will
job.
never go away, Andy, that need for human connection. I mean, think about it. Tony Robbins is still holding these massive, I don't e- you know, I did one of his seminars in, I guess it would have been 2001. There were thousands upon thousands of people. He still does it.
Yeah.
And he said, nothing heightens the human experience greater than human interaction.
It,
But
it's 100% true. And I think that's the real hedge against what, we don't know about like the AI and all the technology changes that are coming. We really don't know. Just like we didn't know there was going to be this pandemic that came that shut our gyms down. Like how could you plan for that? We don't know what's coming technology wise, but whatever comes down, good or bad, and there will be both for people that operate in the online world. There will be opportunities and there will be obstacles. the people that really know how to harness the AI stuff will do better than probably like people that like me and you that that don't. But the ultimate hedge against that is an in-person business, because I think there's and this is another Ryan Lee-ism that he told me a long time ago, was that there's always going to be a market for premium. And I
Yes.
think that that's true, is that there's always going to be people, regardless of the state of the economy
I do
or
it for
whatever.
my own kids.
Yeah, exactly. You want the best. And for a lot of people, they're going to consider the best in-person coaching, because really, honestly, it is. And if your pricing is right, that should generally be, your highest priced type stuff should be, your in-person interaction with your clients. And so I think there's always going to be a market of people who are not going to want to get their training delivered online or
Online.
through, or through a template. They're going to want to go see, because and I don't know if like how yours is, but I know in my business, there's a big difference, not a huge difference, but there is a difference between my in-person clientele and the people that I train online.
Meaning
They're,
different kind of people. I
yeah, and I
train
think,
adults. It's interesting is like my online training and coaching is all adults. Like I have that program Gladiator Strong on Train
mhm,
Heroic, and I cater to men 35 and older. Yet my in person is athletes. Although, I hope, I don't know how much time you have. I want to
I got
train
plenty of time.
adults. I want to
Yeah.
train adults. I want to train men like us who want to be strong. They're not really worried about six pack abs. They want to be strong. They want to feel capable of protecting their family. Um, I want that's the kind of people I want to train. But I got a question for you before I forget.
Sure.
I've been toying with this idea, and Ryan Lee, we're going to have to do like a 3-person Zoom with Ryan for a
Yeah,
podcast.
that'd be great.
Ryan mentioned this in one of those CDs of the month long time ago. And he said, what you could do if you're a gym owner or you have a staff is to train with you. There's like sticker shock, let's say to train with Andy. I don't do the one on the, I'm going to start doing packages for that VIP stuff. But let's say to train with you is $150 an hour, but to train with your staff, your other team is 60 to 80 an hour. So to train with you is like double, almost triple the price. Um, After seeing that coach like lifting himself incorrectly, yet coaching at a place that's very busy, I start thinking to myself, my parents don't even know. I'm not like flaunting or boasting. They don't know how good Zach Evanish is as a strength
Right.
coach. I don't think they fucking know. And so
No.
part of me just says maybe the smartest thing I do is take myself off of the schedule. And if you want to train with me, it's sticker shock. It's a very premium price. And what's interesting is like, that's what I do for my kids. Like I go places and then I sign them up and do some very expensive private training, but I have great coaches.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm just willing to do whatever it takes to give them the best opportunity.
No, I think that that's true. There's pros and cons of everything, right? And I think,
Yes,
one of the cons of putting, it's $150 an hour to train with me and $80 for my coach is people, then they don't even want to pay the 80 because they're like, well, what's wrong with the coach? Like, I don't want the discount. I don't want
you're
the
right.
knockoff. I don't want the knockoff coach. I only want that. And
But
there's
I
been
am
so
the
much of that,
master. I'm the
you know,
master.
but yeah, exactly. But it elevates you, but it kind of is, and it's almost an insult to your coaches. You could probably explain it,
You're
right?
right. No.
I know there's guys that do it. I think you know who Greg Justice is.
Oh yeah, I know Greg. Yeah, he's
Yeah, so
big
he's been in the
corporate.
industry. Yeah, and he's really, I mean, he had a personal training studio in Kansas City in like 1983 or something.
Mhm.
I mean, he was really a pioneer of the private personal training facilities. I mean,
Right.
way before everybody else, and
I
he's
haven't
still
spoken to him for a bit, but I still connect with him a bit on Facebook.
yeah, and he's still doing it. And I think I want to say he's in his 60s.
Yes,
A really good guy though. I mean, really good guy.
he's
But
a
I think
great dude.
and I think he does something similar. I hope I'm not, but I did some consulting with him a few years ago, and
Okay.
I think he did something similar where he had the Greg Justice rate, and then he had the everybody else in the every other trainer in the gym rate. But he basically hasn't taken on a new client in like 20 years, is what he told me. And I'm getting it. And at first I was like kind of skeptical of that, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm like that as well, where, I've been doing it so long. I've got clients that I've had for 15 years, and I never thought I would have a personal training client that, it's weird when a guy signs up with you when he's 55 years old and he's still with you when he's 70.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And when I started, I never thought, I never
Why do you
kind of,
think what do you think are the reasons they stick with you? I mean,
well,
and what does that roundabout cost, if I could ask?
yeah. So, I mean, it's going to, for most of those people that have been doing that, they're going to be, depend on how many times a week they train, that sort of thing. It's going to be between $300 and $500 a month.
How
You
often
know,
do people train when they tend to be in their mid 50s and so on?
the average is probably twice a week.
Yeah.
I have some that do more. Um, Women tend to do more. My female clients tend to do more of the 3 and 4 days, but
How
you'll find
come?
that
Why do you
I think,
think that?
well, partly I think I think they recover better from it.
Hmm.
I think older men, if you load them up, you squat and deadlift and all that kind of stuff. Just they're being more neuromuscularly efficient and that sort of thing. They're able to create more stress in their training sessions, and so training for them, you know, 3 or 4 days a week gets to, under weights gets to be a little bit too much. So twice a week tends to be something that works good with their schedule, that they can be consistent with. Even if 3 was better, 2, they're going to do it and not miss. Most of those people that have been doing it for that long rarely miss. They're very consistent with their training.
Twice a
And
week can be, I mean,
oh yeah, I mean,
I
two full body workouts a week of squat, deadlift, bench, press, rows. Of just kind of hitting the basics.
and then
Um,
on their off day, what do you tell them to do? Walk every day?
it depends on the person, depends what they're looking for. If they're trying to lose weight, then yeah. Mostly I handle that through diet, but that's, if I encourage most people that are older to do some lighter, moderate intensity cardio, but I always tell them, like, look, we're not going to do that in your personal training set. We're not going to come in here and pay me so you can walk on the treadmill. Like, if you want to do that, you can go somewhere else or walk outside or whatever you want to do. The way that I train a lot of my people, though, if a guy's going to train with me, say a busy executive, if he's going to train with me twice a week, our sessions are going to consist of a pretty good amount of heavy strength training, but there's going to be a cardiovascular element to that as well, because we may start the session with, I have a feeling you probably do something similar, where the session is started with, a heavy strength lift for 3 sets of 5 or whatever, full rest time, heavy weight, low reps, that kind of stuff. And then we will often finish the session with like some sort of circuit based training that
Yes.
complements that lift, and so there's, you don't have to go out and run to do cardio. I mean, that you can do carries,
Running
and
beats up the body as you get
it, it,
older.
it does. And sometimes just a simple circuit of, you don't even have to do like metcon exercises, like, kettlebells and carries and all that. I mean, for a lot of people, especially new people, I mean, even a circuit of something like, bicep curls and abs and calf raises. I mean, something as simple as that,
Agreed.
like a simple circuit like that, where none of those exercises are hard on the cardiovascular system on their own, but even just something as simple as that on a loop for 3 to 5 sets, like, for an untrained person, that actually is not a bad cardio workout, and
I
you're getting the
agree.
strength work in. And so I try to be as efficient as possible with the sessions that I have with my clients, so that I feel like I'm their one-stop shop, so that when they're looking to say, well, I train with this guy twice a week and I get a pretty good strength stimulus, I get a pretty good cardiovascular stimulus, and I always kind of preach all the other kind of peripheral benefits of strength training, like things like balance. If you work with an older population, they always want to know about things like mobility and balance. Well, I'm not going to do a lot of stretching with them. I don't have that much time with them. I have maybe 2 hours a week. So I'm not going to do a lot of stretching, or like have them stand on one foot on a Bosu ball or whatever. I'm not big on
Right.
that kind of stuff, but I think the best balance and mobility exercise you can do is a full range of motion squat. And so, if I kind of preach to them so that I create buy-in, that we're doing this, we're not just trying to build strength, but we're also this is a balance exercise. As Rip would say, one of the criteria for a good squat is that you don't fall down, and it's like, it's true. So, and these people, they realize it. And it's like, a lot of them are saying, well, I can't squat down and stand back up because I don't have the mobility. And, so the best stretch for the squat is the squat, and so preaching full range of motion lifting, with good mechanics is great for, it's great for mobility, it's great for balance, plus it's good for strength. And then you take a couple of good strength exercises and put them on a circuit, and you've got a cardio workout. And so in that hour twice a week, they're getting a very comprehensive workout. So
That's
they
how
feel
I
like,
train. I
yeah, that's how I train
personally,
too.
because
And I
it's so
think, like, you
time
look at most,
efficient.
like most of the CrossFit gyms that have lasted, I think a lot of the CrossFit gyms that didn't last, part of the reason they didn't last is because they burned out their clients.
They
You know,
destroyed
they
people.
just, and but
And
I
if,
think the
yeah.
good ones have gravitated towards almost exactly what we do. The session starts with a strength lift, a programmed strength lift. So you're not coming in and doing a squat, you know, you do it now and then you don't do another squat for 8 weeks because it didn't come up in the randomized WOD. So you squat on Monday, you bench on Tuesday or whatever, but you start the session with a strength lift. That's some sort of, programming that makes sense. And then you finish with some sort of circuit type of Metcon deal or whatever, kind of tailored to your
Yeah,
population
that's
or to the client. Yeah.
supplemental to your main lifts. And I also think as we get older, and you're, more intelligent and more experienced in this, but I feel like by doing your accessories as a supplement, as a circuit, uh, it stops you from trying to go too heavy on them. Because as you get older, you still have, I always say men have that 16, they have that 16-year-old in their brain. So they're like, I used to do reverse lunges with 2 plates on each side when I was in high school. But yeah, you haven't lifted for 20 years and you're not in high school anymore. So by doing it as like a circuit, you may end up doing lunges that are body weight. So like today, I took a break from the barbell. I did kettlebell squats, a little kettlebell circuit, but then I did sleds, carries, and a body weight unilateral exercise. So either I did walking lunges or Bulgarian split squats, but I just did them body weight. But man, it kicked my butt and it got me going. And by doing it as a circuit, it stops me from doing, lunges or split squats with 50s in each hand. And you know what? Like as an adult, you're looking at, as we're coaches, we look at other things. You see somebody do it and you're like, maybe I should be doing split squats with 80-pound dumbbells. And then I'm like, well, that's not going to really help me at home. I'm
Yeah.
going to
And that's
feel
where it always
destroyed.
goes back to putting, what are you trying to do here?
Yes.
What are we trying to, and it's important as a coach for both with yourself, but also with your clients, is to really sometimes zoom out and look at what is the big picture goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? We can only recover from so much, in a given week. And what's the risk reward out of, like you said, super heavy reverse lunges, out of just doing them with body weight, especially
Yeah.
when you're getting your strength stimulus from something else. So I think that's part of being a good coach and making yourself valuable as a coach to your clients is, part of that is how efficient can you be? I think when you can get all of the work done with somebody in 2 sessions a week, and check all the boxes, I think you're providing a lot of value. And so they're willing to pay more money for, say, a twice a week program. You don't need to come in the gym 5 days a week or whatever to justify
Yeah.
the value, because they're getting what they need. And, your personal training clients, you know, people always say, like, well, because I was talking about one of the differences between my online clients and my in-person clients. I'd say one of the main differences is the in-person clients are much more likely to say that one of the biggest reasons that they're paying you is for accountability. And people say, well, that's just being lazy. Like, you need it's rent a friend, or it's, I've heard all the criticisms about
People are
personal.
lazy
Yeah,
and they
well,
need this.
they are, but also sometimes people, if you look at their lives, these aren't lazy people. People that a lot of people that have the discretionary income to pay, say, $500 a month on fitness training, are not necessarily lazy. They're very, very busy and productive in other areas of their lives. They're doctors or lawyers or small business owners or whatever. They just prefer to outsource the thinking and that sort of thing. And it's not like they're going to skip the workout with you because they're in bed with the covers pulled up over their head. It's going to be because they're probably working or doing something with their kids. So the accountability is such that they're paying for it. They know it's going to get done. So they value it. They put a lot of value on it, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily passionate about it, about lifting and that sort of thing. And I had a guy tell me a long time ago, he's like, look, he goes, I don't really care how strong I am. I just don't want to be weak.
They
And
know
that
it's
kind of,
important in their life. Yeah. They're
right.
not
So they,
chasing the numbers. They have this. Yeah, you're right.
yeah. I mean, and it's kind of like I have areas of my life that I'm like that. Like, when I'm not a car guy, and I know a lot of guys aren't. Like, I don't give a shit about like how the car works and all that kind. I know some guys could read about cars and work on their car all weekend long, like that's their passion. I'm not. Like, when my car has having trouble, I just want to take it to the mechanic and I'm just like, fix it. I don't give a fuck what's wrong with it. Just fix it and tell me when it's done and give it back
Yes.
to me. You know what I mean? I don't want to know how you did it. I don't care what tools you used. I don't care what your methodology was. Like,
Yeah, it's a
is it
great
fixed?
analogy.
And if you do a good job, I'll pay you whatever you want. And if you're fast about it, even better. And I just want the car back and I want it to work. And I think that's in a lot of ways, that's a lot of the reason why people will pay somebody like us and an older adult is they're like, look, I know I've got to do the work, but I don't want to think about it. I don't want to program it. I don't want to just, I'll pay you to be here waiting on me at 7 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. I'll do what you tell me to do. And then I'm out of here,
Have
you
you
know?
something I've been considering, speaking of kind of how busy the world is and this move towards convenience, right? Like we have apps on our phones, you're talking about technology changes. I mean, you're right. We have no clue what's coming in the next 10 years compared to what we didn't had no clue. We were on forums and then Facebook wiped out all forums. Like people don't know how to comment. I would post a blog post in 2007 and have 70 comments. Now zero. But
Yeah.
do you ever have people like with that in mind with the changes who just want to train for 30 minutes or because they're so time crunched they do a
Yeah.
30-minute session?
Yeah. I have some people that do that. And it's, I charge the same for it. I don't differentiate. I never liked, one of the gyms that I worked at, we had different rates for 30, 45 and
For
60-minute
time,
sessions. I never
yeah.
liked that. I always felt like if somebody needed 5 more minutes to get the work done, then I would give it to them. And I didn't want to have to cut people off and be like, oh, your 30 minutes is up. But you kind of have to if somebody is paying more than them for that extra 15 minutes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or else it creates a certain amount of unfairness. Now, people don't always know about it, but still, if you're charging like that, then you either have to cut people off before they're done, or because they paid for an hour. I mean, sometimes you look at a client, especially if they're new, and at the 45-minute mark, I mean,
They're
they're
done.
done,
I
fucking
say
done.
this all the
And
time to
and it,
parents.
and it's like, if it's like, so you wind up coming up with bullshit filler to take them to an hour, and you're not doing yourself
They're
any good. You're
dead.
not
I
doing.
tell parents, I'm like, listen, the first few weeks, they may not make it into an hour. It's likely to be 45 minutes, especially a middle school kid. And even
Or
adults, like I think to
oh
myself, I want to get back to like Muay Thai. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna even last an hour,
no, you
but
probably
that
wouldn't.
class is gonna go for an hour.
Yeah, and it's like that's the way it is. So I just tell people like we have, I look at the clock to a degree because I more or less try to get people in and out in an hour. But if I tell people, look, if we're done, I have the workout set. If we're done in 45 minutes because you moved fast and we didn't bullshit around or whatever, and you got the work done in 45 minutes, then go. Like, we're not going to come up with, and most people appreciate that. They
Yeah.
and so for a lot of people, over time they've just, it's kind of, they didn't come in necessarily saying that they want a 30-minute session. They've just, over time, it's kind of morphed into, I prefer, let's get in, do only the bare minimum. Let's do it fast. And let's get out of here. And look, I've got a client she's been with me she's one of my originals. So she's been with me for close to 15 years, 81 years old. So she started in her 60s. And she does twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 o'clock. I mean, for 15 years but she goes for 30 minutes. That's it.
Right. Does somebody
And
who's 80 need to go for an hour?
dude, and I'm telling you, when you see this woman in real life outside,
Hmm.
she does not move or act or anything like an 80-year-old. And you think, man, what is that worth and you look at other 80-year-olds that are on walkers or dead, or you just infirm or in nursing homes or whatever. You look at that quality of life versus her quality of life. I mean, there's no difference between what she does in a day versus what somebody that's
It's
60 does in a day.
amazing.
And the energy level she has, the mobility, the strength, all of that stuff. And all of that in 30 minutes, and not that I'm the sole source of that. I mean, she walks on and she watches her diet. I mean, there's a number of things that, play into that. But as far as formal exercise, twice a week for 30 minutes, but for 15 years, barely ever missing a session. And I think that's where it comes down to consistency trumps all. Is just not ever taking that break. And you look and say, what's that worth monetarily to have that quality of life that late into life?
That's I want to, when I'm older, I want to be able to do that. What are some, like, what does the last training session look like for her? I wonder, what does an 81-year-old do when they're training?
Oh, a typical workout for her.
Yeah.
A typical workout for her is going to be it's always going to be a circuit. So we come in and we just start the circuit. The first round for her is kind of a light warm up round, and we just warm up whatever the exercises are. And generally, it's like 3 exercises, sometimes 4. She has a number of. She's got some neck issues. She's got some low back issues. Like she's had some surgeries. She had a botched surgery on her neck, so like she has some issues where like we don't do any kind of like real heavy deadlifts, but like I do like kettlebell deadlifts. But it's basically a leg, a push, and a pull.
Perfect.
Most of the time, and it's like in a circuit, and you go through that. She'll go through that like 5 times. I vary the exercises up. But she does like low push-ups, like off of a rack, like good form, like quality push-ups and stuff like that, body weight rows, kettlebell deadlifts, squatting 1 to 2 times per week. So on when her back feels good, we deadlift. When her back feels a little then we'll just squat twice that week.
She'll deadlift with a straight bar or a trap bar.
You deadlifts usually I limit
kettlebell.
that to a kettlebell just because of her issues. Squats are generally she'll do all back squats, dumbbell squats, goblet squats, kettlebell squats. I mix it up because for somebody at that level, they're not continuously from age say 65 to 80 when they've been training continuously like that. Like people are like, well, how are you still progressing? And it's like, well, we're not. Like the fact that you're in here each day is a form of progression. You're not going up in weight linearly for 15 years going into your 80s. You're trying to maintain what you have. But that's when people talk about maintenance, they act like that's easy. But the default position when you're that age is to go backwards rapidly. Like that's one of the main differences between training older people, like especially like 60s, 70s, 80s, is time off is not good. Like you go backwards so fucking fast.
Right.
And the older you get, the faster it goes and the harder it is to make up that lost ground. And they know it because they go on a 2-week vacation or something and they come back and it's like they're almost starting at ground zero. And it takes them feeling. They take them forever to get back to where they were. And it gets to a point where they don't want to miss. And they see how fast they backslide. And the good thing about that is that it creates value in their mind. They know how valuable the workouts are because they see how fast that they backslide. A 20-year-old kid takes off a week or two, pretty much comes back in and picks up where he left off, for the most part. And if he doesn't, it doesn't take long to get back, to where he was. So, but the older you get, the harder that is. And so it really doesn't pay for them to take, a lot of time off.
It's also, I live in I explain to people, I live in a beach town, very social, a lot of bars here. People drink in their backyards and everything. And the people who do that who might be a little younger than me, look 10 years older than what they are. So these poor lifestyle choices age them. But when you're younger, you could do that stuff and you get away with it. And you are really, that's such a powerful point. A lot of the people listening, some are coaches, some are not. But like I said, it's a lot of men in their mid-30s and older. I always tell them, you transition from chasing a number to training for life. And you're just trying to make sure like the training you do makes you better at life, whatever those things are. And you're right. Like if I have a week of vacation when we go away, and that's like the only week I stop training. And yeah, dude, I feel it when I come back, even though I'm doing physical things, I'm swimming, I'm, in the boat, jumping in and out of the water, but you feel that missing strength component. So as we get older, strength is so important. And I think that this generation of teenagers now, I don't know what generation that's called, it will actually be more important for them because they are weaker. They keep getting weaker and weaker. I'm writing an article for Simply Faster now about how I trained athletes before 2010 compared to now. And it's like you see this like all this advanced training, you're a, you know, highly experienced power lifter, but you see like places are training 15-year-olds with like band resisted this and accommodating resistance that, weight releasers on squats, when it's like, dude, you look around, you're like, can anybody just squat 315 for 5? Why
Yeah,
are
that
we going so
and and
crazy?
I think that was one of the reasons why starting strength and Rippetoe's message took off, was that was at a time when there was kind of a peak craziness in terms of the sport, a lot of the sports performance stuff or
I
whatever.
think the
And
peak is
it
still going. It's
it,
out
it
of
probably, well,
control.
it is, and it's easier to sell, to be honest. I
It
mean,
is.
when a kid wants to get faster, it's just like that guy you were talking about. You're gonna, if a parent wants speed for their kid and they're not educated on this stuff, it's a hard sell to tell them that where they need to be is not on the turf field with the cones, but it's in the squat rack. That doesn't look like speed training. That looks like
That's right.
powerlifting. But it's hard to convince them that, the bigger engine doesn't slow the car down, and that, all the technique stuff that you can do or whatever is not, none of that is going to make the same difference as getting that kid squat from 135 to 5 to 3, as it is, take it from 135 to 5 to 315 for 5. That's going to have the most impact on that kid's
And that's a
speed.
lot of work. And you know
It's a
what? It it looks like work. And I really think that's turns people off, is they're like, damn, that takes work. It also takes guts
Yep.
to face that heavier weight. And listen, I do the speed and agility stuff, so I'm speaking from both sides. There's no guts when a kid has to run around the cone and
No.
sprint as fast as he can. There's still a lot of effort, but it's different. It not only impacts the athlete different physically, but also psychologically. And
Yeah, when you squat down for that, I always tell people the hardest thing you can do in the gym, I think, is a true max effort set of 5 on the squat. Like
that's
that,
a
to me, that's the hardest lift. It's harder than a deadlift because of the psychological factor of, and that's important for kids of, you as the coach know that they're gonna, I always try to program weight so that, I know that they're going to make it. I don't set kids up to crash into the pins or whatever. But the kid doesn't know when he squats down for rep number 5 whether he's going to come back up or not. And so it takes a certain amount of balls to take that, when you barely get that 4th rep up, to squat down and try to hit number 5. And it's hard to replicate that with other things. That's a unique teaching experience for the kid, because it's all, we've all had that as lifters, where you have that internal conversation going in your head,
but
um,
this
during that set.
here's what's interesting stuff that you say about that is when I was younger, growing up in these gyms, mom and pop type gyms, I was taught that if you are going for that rep, you will make the rep or die. I am not going to save you. And I know this bothers people when I say this, but I was like, I never saw anybody fail a lift until CrossFit started. Like, you saw somebody like struggle a little bit with the squat,
Yeah.
they'd bail out. And I
Yeah.
was like, I didn't know you're allowed to just quit. I thought you make the rep or die. I swear to you, the first time I saw it, I just thought that is what we do. And I remember being spotted by a guy at a gym while I was benching. And I was like, and I like closed my eyes grinding. And then he said, you went for it. You fucking get it. And he was a big guy. And I used to just want somebody big and strong to spot me so they could maybe share with me a training tip. And that training tip stuck with me for life, along with like, even though I'm not so like, I share how I did bad, wrong training in high school. I was doing leg presses, and I remember training with this guy, Jeff, was older than me. I was maybe 15, he's 25, and I was doing leg presses, and everything I did was like get to the forced reps. And I start like struggling, and Jeff is on a bench like 5-6 feet away, and I go, help me. And he goes, help yourself. And I thought that was like, I mean, if I could put a banner, in the Times Square Jumbotron, like, help yourself, make the rep or die.
Yeah,
It
and I
has
think I
such,
and I think that and I think in most people's training, there's definitely there's a time and a place when you're young for that mentality. I think over time you
yes,
have to smarten up a little bit as you get
correct.
older. But I think it's valuable for both for lifting and for life for people to go through those periods of training, even if there's a little stupidity mixed in,
Correct.
with the training. I mean, I think every great lifter has a period of, I don't think you could find a single, great lifter nowadays, the Dan Greens of the world, or, whoever the top guys in the powerlifting, who didn't have a period of time in their training that was like that. That was,
You
they look
needed
back
to
on it,
develop the mind.
right, where they go back and they look back and they go, boy, that was stupid, and I wouldn't train like that again at 35 at my level, but I probably wouldn't be here at this level at age 35 had I not gone through that. And I just don't think that's the problem that I have with a lot of this kind of RPE based programming and that kind of stuff. It's not that I disagree with it so much in principle. It makes some sense, but I think implemented at the wrong time, you're teaching people that are a year into lifting to that,
They
the
really
biggest,
don't understand that.
that
Yeah,
they don't, because and it is true. Like, I don't program to where I want people I'm not one of those guys that says it's not a squat workout if you don't wind up on the floor, like
correct.
that's, I don't want my athletes crashing into the pins every time that they squat, because I don't think it's productive. And it's not, that's not good for the psyche either. But if you don't have a workout occasionally where you try for number 5 and you don't get it, and you have to set that thing down on the pins, then you don't know how to use something like RPE. You don't know what having 1 rep left in the tank feels like,
You are
you
right.
know.
This is
And there's
good.
so many. I mean, I have these lifters come to me all the time that have been using these RPE based programs, and for those that know how to use it correctly, I think it's a good tool to manage fatigue and manage stress. But there's a lot of people that will rate stuff on their programming for me that'll say, this was a RPE 9, or this, or if you use RIR like I do, they'll say, I had one RIR 1, I had 1 rep left in reserve, and it's like, no, dude,
Okay.
you had like 5.
When you
You know,
watch it, yes, they feel like,
yeah,
oh man, that was hard. Then you watch it, you're like, dude,
yeah,
you moved it. You didn't grind that rep
right,
at all, which means you had probably
yeah.
3 or 4 more reps.
But they just don't know what that is. So, in principle, I'm not opposed to a system like RPE where you kind of stop the majority of your sets with 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. I think that's a good system for like longevity. But if your interpretation of is that, I only have 1 rep left in the tank when you actually have 3, 4, 5 reps left in the tank, then you're just not training very hard,
What
and
do you use, whether it's for online or in person, a software that programs percents or like that gives them the number to use, the
no,
weight?
no, I actually am old school. I give them the number to use. I usually will start people off with a percentage at the beginning, and then I'm very, very hands-on with my one-on-one online clients. I with my gym clients too, but with my online clients, I do everything kind of a week at a time.
So how do
Um,
they send you their work? Are you using any of
we
the apps?
No, I hate them. I use
Wow.
we do a shared Google spreadsheet.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah,
That's
and
amazing,
I have
Andy.
a call. Do you know who John Meadows was?
Oh
The
yeah,
yeah.
of course.
So I mean, a lot of people, I know some bodybuilders that trained with him, and he was pretty highly sought after bodybuilding coach
Oh, he
at the
just
very
sent an
top.
email.
Just send an email.
Yeah, my
Just
buddy AJ Roberts,
yeah,
worked with him. And yeah, he said he would just send an email. I think John may have also done his nutrition, and it was just email exchanges.
yeah.
And
You
see,
know,
I think there's a lot of beauty in that. Some
there
people
is.
want it, but I
Yeah.
like,
No, I've worked with guys before that are very techy, and they bitch about, they don't like the way that I do it, even though it's simple and it doesn't ever fuck up. They want an app, or they want, or whatever. And I'm not opposed to those things. I just have a system that I know works, that I know how to use, and I'm just, I'm so busy coaching people and doing other stuff. I don't have time to, I just don't have a real need to say go out and learn how to work a new software
and did
and
they
transfer.
send you a unlisted YouTube video of their lift, or what are they?
Yes. So yeah. So I have different options for that. If they can create an Instagram account or an unlisted YouTube, or Facebook, or whatever. I say is, I don't care how you send me the video,
Yeah,
as long as I don't have to download the link to my computer. As long as I don't have to download your video to my computer to view it, I
cool.
don't care what it is.
Yes.
And then we just have a real simple system where I've got a shared Google Doc spreadsheet, and on the left hand side is, here's what I want you to do for the week: exercises, sets, reps, load, all that stuff. And on the right is your what you actually do, and it usually matches up pretty well. And then they have a
That's
place
pretty
where they can
solid.
put,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
I
it's,
don't even know how to do these. I hate to admit it, like the Google spreadsheets, all that, I suck at that. So online, I use Train Heroic, but that's for the group training. At my gym, I use Wodify, which you probably heard of them. They were for
Mhm.
CrossFit gyms. I used it because it was managing the business. It does the billing, the attendance,
No,
um,
that's cool.
I don't have paper at the gym, so liability forms, waivers, whatever, it's all through that. And I got rid of cash because I used to have people pay me and then I had to track it with paper, and I had two gyms. So if I wasn't at the other gym, not that I would ever do this, but parents would send their kids to the gym, strategically when I wasn't there. And I
Yeah.
remember when I went through who didn't pay, I'd see people who didn't pay 3 to 6 months. That was easily like 15, 20 plus $1,000 lost. And I always say to myself, I don't ever miss when my daughter's tennis needs payment, my son's base, but people were
Yeah.
doing it. So when I got Wodify, I systematized it. Billing is always on the first of the month. And then there's all these notifications. So if like Andy Baker's credit card is expiring, it emails you. If you need to sign the liability form, it emails that to you. And so I wanted to get away from paper because I was gonna like my brain was exploding trying to look
Yeah.
at all that shit.
Yeah. And I've got systems like that for my gym that I
Do you
use.
guys use
Um,
software, or do you use software at the gym for billing or anything?
yeah, I use this company that I've had forever called Pay Simple
Okay.
that does a lot of that. As far as the programming, I have a lot of clients that keep notebooks. Some people use
Yes.
apps, like they like to log their own stuff in an app or whatever. And I'm like, you can do whatever you want. I'm not going to use it, but if you want to, if you want to keep track of your own stuff on there just for your own records or whatever, that's fine. And one of the things that has helped with is this is one of the things I've started doing more is giving clients more control over tracking some of their stuff.
Yeah.
Um, as a because I felt like there was a time where I kind of did too much hand holding with my clients,
Correct. Yeah.
and it created a dependence on me, and it actually makes it harder to coach. If you're trying to do a group when your clients are very very dependent on you to do everything, and when you're charging a lot of money, especially to adults, it's different than when you train kids. But when you're training adults, there's especially when you're young, like I was when I started, like 24, and you're getting, a 55-year-old executive coming in your gym and you're charging them a lot of money. There's a certain amount of service that you're trying to deliver to that client.
I
And
agree.
so doing things like loading their plates on the bar for them and putting the collars on for them, little stuff like that you do, and really hand holding for them. Of course, they like it, but it also creates a dependence on you. And then when you try to expand your operation to where you're coaching, 4 to 6 people at a time, it makes it harder when there's the expectation that you've got to float around the room and load everybody's plates and call. So you need to
I
teach
had
your
to learn
clients.
that even
Yeah.
at the high school. I started I kind of had this thing where I was like, we're gonna have to do an FIO, like kind of what you said. We did wrong stuff. I was like, there's gonna be some figuring it out on our own, meaning I got a large group of two teams and maybe, a third team that's like a small group, half the team shows up. Well, if I say squat and I'm demonstrating how to do it, now you got to coach each other. And I just started thinking like, I got so crazy of like, here's where the hand, get your hand set here, get under here. Here's how you put the weights on. Oh, I'm doing this. Then it was like, listen, I'm showing it to you. Now you guys have to take it. Oh, you just invited your friend who missed the first 2 weeks. Now you have to warm your friend up. Your
Yeah.
friend's good because if I warm your friend up, I'm ignoring 50 other people because I'm giving
Right.
this kid a one-on-one.
Yeah, and that makes it harder. Like when it makes if your clients are super dependent on you in that small group session, it makes it hard to bring in new people for one thing, because you've got 3 or 4 people there, let's say in your training session, like I might, and I bring in a brand new person. I'm obviously going to have to spend more time with that brand new client than I
Yes,
am with the other, but you don't want to completely ignore those
correct.
other people, but you got to be able to tell them, hey, load 135 on the squat. And they need to be able to do that,
Yeah,
without you having to do it. So you're kind of coaching this person very intimately while you're kind of hollering out little cues and commands to the
right.
other
And they
people.
understand.
And they understand. Now
Um,
you still have to watch them, because clients will do shit. Like, I mean, you'll tell them put, 185 on the bar, and you got to double check them sometimes, because you'll have them where they put a 25 on one side and a 35 on the other. something, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you got to kind of watch for that
Oh,
kind of stuff.
are you a believer in 35-pound plates?
I have one set in the gym.
What do you
So
what do you have like what old weights float around in Texas? Because York,
yeah,
Pennsylvania is not far from here, so
I've
a
got
lot of
York
York.
plates. I've got York plates. I've got a York barbell. All of my stuff I have just bought used over the years, and I keep it. I mean,
How
I've
big
got
is the current facility? When I look on the
so
website, it's like a pretty nice size.
yeah, it's 2,500 square feet.
That's a
So
good
it's
oh
a
yeah,
pretty good
little
size.
I'm like 2,200 square feet. And so membership there, Andy, is to coach with you or to coach with the other guy. Is I
I
think I saw on the website open gym or no?
I probably still on the website, but I shut that down. When we expanded the facility several years ago, I experimented with that because that was always something I wanted to do. And the problem is when you're trying to run, if you're doing just one-on-one personal training, it's fine. If you're trying to run small group personal training through there like I do, that's my only thing that I do is small group training. I don't have any differentiating between. So if you're training with me, you're training in a semi-private small group, whatever you want to call it.
Gotcha.
um, if even one or two members show up during those sessions, it throws off the whole thing
Because they
equipment
want to use
wise.
the equipment. And you're like, damn, I needed that, but they have this open gym
Yeah. And
membership.
so we actually did that. That was kind of almost a panic move during COVID,
Gotcha.
because we weren't sure who was coming back. Being that a lot of my clients are older, a lot of them had some reservations about coming back right after COVID or whatever. And it was like, I opened the gym back up after a month, and it was like, the phone wasn't exactly ringing off the hook for new members to come in because the
Right.
fucking government had scared people so badly about gyms. And I had people calling me saying, what are your cleaning procedures and all this shit? And it's like,
I know.
and it's like, oh, I vacuum once a year whether it needs it or not. And it's like, so
That is
it's
funny.
it's like the same it's always been. But so it was, like a lot of people, we did things during COVID because you didn't know how long
Oh
the shit was
man.
going to last or
I,
whatever. So it's like that we experimented with that. But then when we got back to normal, when all of my normal personal training clients eventually made it back into the gym, new people started coming back into the gym. And a lot of people liked coming into a smaller gym versus going to a really crowded Globo
yes.
gym after COVID. So the smaller facility was popular there for a while. And so once we kind of got back to normal operations with our personal training, the open gym thing just didn't fit anymore. And so we had to cut that out. So, we tried for a little while having like certain hours where people could come in, but then it was like, you're charging people for a membership, but it's like, well, you can come between like 2 and 4. And
Yes.
it's people, it wasn't a good offering on our part. And we weren't doing right by us, our training clients, or the potential
And
members. So we just cut it out.
it wasn't like anything really worth it. You start looking at like, well, yeah, I think I like what you're doing with the online, and I think with that blend, that original, the OG Ryan Lee method, I think it's been great. We definitely got to do a part two. Man, this was so good. Let me ask you like some quick kind of rapid questions.
Sure,
You
sure.
have a lot of different like programs for sale on the website. What has been your favorite one that you put together?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I like the what's on there, my power building program.
Yeah.
It's my KSC method for power building that's on there.
What does that stand for?
That was
Kingswood?
so
Kingwood.
KSC was the original name of my gym, which was Kingwood Strength and Conditioning. And I
Yeah.
actually changed the name of the gym several years ago. Something I should have done a long time. The strength and conditioning thing was not a great name for my gym.
This is
Um,
something I've been thinking about a lot. Why, what was the name changed to and why
I,
was
I
it
I
bad?
I changed it to Baker Personal Training. So
Oh,
I
okay.
I went more basic. The strength and conditioning thing was weird because once I switched away from athletes, um, to the normal adult population, strength and conditioning was not terminology that they really used, and so they weren't really. There was, it's like if you're explaining in your marketing, you're losing. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
If there's questions about, it's like whatever every great marketer says. When I open up your website or your business card or whatever you hand me, I want to know within like 5 seconds who you are and what you do. And Baker personal training, it's like boom, they people, and I noticed early on, like people weren't, I don't know how yours is locally, but when people were referring me locally, they would never refer their friends and family to Kingwood Strength and Conditioning. They always just go see Andy. Go see. So people knew. So I don't know if people like refer locally, if they're like go see Zach, or if they're like go to Underground Strength Gym.
They say
Like,
go to the underground. And but the tough thing for me is when somebody like that's been with us, they'll say go to the UG, under space ground. No, 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 no. So
yeah,
I've really been struggling with, like, do I change the name of this to I almost did it as like a joke, but not a joke. But the last shirts we put out say Underground Speed Club. And I said, because they demonize the word strength. People are afraid of strength. A good friend of mine, a real good friend of mine, called me today about training his son. And he's like, yeah, but he needs speed and agility. And I'm like, bro, we do that the whole training session is athletic based. We go through a prep,
yeah,
then a athletic warm up, which segues into some plyos and some speed and deceleration and change of direction. Then we do our strength. Then we do our I hate to call it a Metcon. We do our finisher. It's like a
mm-hmm.
muscle building circuit, but we put so much content out there. But I guess my buddy doesn't look at Instagram. He's not on Instagram, but
Right,
it's Gary Halbert said something like the name of your business should explain what you do.
right,
And so I'm always like, man, underground strength gym. People, when they say underground, I'm like, damn it.
yeah. But it's, I
It's
mean, like
a
I know
struggle.
about it. Like if somebody, and I'm not necessarily your target market, obviously, but it's I know the brand, so the brand is powerful, and I even remember like the tire logo or whatever,
Yes.
so like and so with me locally, I just kind of went with the flow a little bit. Like I didn't try to force the strength and
Smart.
conditioning on
Very
people. It was
smart.
just like I just recognized the trend that was happening, and I kind of went with it. Is like people, they would refer to me is, and I fought the whole, like, how people always like, I'm not a personal trainer, I'm a strength coach. Like I
Mm-hmm.
understand, like I get that. Like you don't
Yep.
want to be associated with the dorky kid at Golds that doesn't know anything and that has like a 20 question online certification. You don't want to be associated with that. But the reality is that my clients, my good clients, when they would refer me to their friends and family who are also good clients, would say, go see my personal trainer, Andy. And it was
People
like,
still don't
you
know
can
what a
only,
strength coach is. They,
yeah, I know,
yeah,
exactly. And
they
that's,
call
so it
it
was like,
speed. I tell people, when I consult with coaches for business, I tell them, parents don't call me and say, get my son strong, get my daughter strong. They say he needs speed and agility and core strength. Those are the
right.
words that they use. So I tell them,
Yeah.
if you're going to create a business name, you probably need to create that into the title. Or
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with this. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
real cool conversation that I don't
I mean,
think a
because
lot of people are speaking about a lot.
you can fight this shit if you want to, but the reality is the marketplace decides what language they're going to use. And it's like, it's the same thing with like core, right? You see people all the time that are like, well, we don't have a core, we have abs. And like, I get it.
People
Like
understand core.
and like the core training thing has been overdone for sure. Like the amount of like core exercises that people do and all that. Like I get all of that, but at the same time, that's what the marketplace is asking for.
Just
So
speak their language.
speak their language. And it's like when I now like I kind of knew early on, like the Baker personal training probably would have been the better name. It took me a long time to pull the trigger on that, but when I finally did, is like the best thing I've ever done because
Why did
I
you have to
because I
change
don't have
your?
I
Oh,
don't have to explain to people who I am or what I do. Like
you're right.
when they would call the gym, they'd be like, "Well, is this like a gym or is this a class or is this like a personal training?" I
Very
even had people
smart.
say, "Do you sell equipment or is it just for athletes?" Like
Oh,
so it was like now with Baker personal training, it's like, "Oh, it's a personal training studio." Like they know exactly what it is and they
did you
know.
change the LLC or the DBA, or what did you?
No, I actually still, the DBA is still KSC, but that doesn't matter. I mean, no, clients don't ever see that. The only person that sees that is like the bank and the insurance
Right.
company. But basically, just the name, the name on the building changed, and like my business cards and my website and all that kind of stuff. But also, I think that had to do, it was also more effective because I had been in Kingwood for so long, that people knew Andy Baker as a train, like the name had gotten around enough to where it
Yeah.
made sense then to put my name on the business, versus had I done that at first, maybe it wouldn't have been so powerful. But people kind of, there was a lot of people that knew of Andy Baker, the trainer here locally, and they didn't connect me to Kingwood Strength and Conditioning. They had no idea that that's
It's
where I
crazy.
was.
I know we
So
think
you
people
think
know us. Yeah.
but they don't locally like that. And so I think putting I tell, new trainers or whatever, if you're racking your brain up against the wall about what you're going to name your business, I mean, last name personal training is a good start,
Wow.
and then if you want to build a brand off of that, you can, but it's not the worst idea in the world. Bland is okay because it explains exactly who you are and what you do. People don't know what's Titan Fitness or what, like, what
What
I'm
would
saying?
you
Like,
change? So let's put you on the spot. What would you change my gym name to?
I mean, depending on if you want to train, you know, Zach Evanesh personal training, man. People know exactly what it is. You would
They'd be
never
like,
have to.
what kind of last name is that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think everybody's wondered that, but that's good. I mean, because it's hey, people remember that. People won't, just the name, the hyphenated name is unique.
Personal training, I feel, is making a comeback. Like it went away because CrossFit had these mega classes, right? CrossFit facilities were like, I remember they were all 1,000 square feet. Then somebody
Yeah,
went 2,500 square feet. Then somebody went 5,000 square feet. We were like, whoa. Then somebody went 10,000. Then people in Miami went like 2 floors, 20,000 each or 30,000. It was insane.
yeah,
And
but you know
classes
what?
were
Some of those,
90 people.
when I had a huge CrossFit open down the street from me, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. 10, yeah, yeah. Anyway, it worried me when it happened. It's been the best thing in the world because people do those classes. A lot of times they go to it's just like they go to the Globo gym first, they don't like it.
Right.
Then they go to a CrossFit gym, they don't like it. And then they come to my place and it's like, this is what I was looking for. Like actual, like, intimate level coaching, like one-on-one coaching, a lot of detailed instruction, a small environment. I'm not getting lost. I'm in the new guy, and I showed up to this class full of 30 other people, and like they're telling me to
Dude,
do high rep snatches, and I have
in
no idea
Miami,
what that
nine. I
is.
remember that place had when they told me that this place had like 90 people in a group, and I started kind of thinking in my brain, how many fucking barbells do you need to buy? Bumper plates. I said, if somebody like drops the barbell wrong, like you're gonna break somebody's leg. It was I don't know even how that business model worked, how much money they made, how long it lasted, but the guts it took of the person starting that business to say, hey dude, let's buy 100 pairs of 45s, 100 pairs of 25s, 100 pairs of
Yeah,
15-pound bumpers, 100 barbells, and just CrossFit gyms just became open space with rings and barbells. Whereas you
well,
and I came up during the era where it was in a garage. Somebody had like a mountain bike or a kayak up on the wall. There was a
yeah,
sandbag, a barbell, a squat stand. To me, that was like real training. And
yeah.
then it just went nuts.
It just went nuts, and I think actually for a lot of in a lot of ways, I think the televised CrossFit Games actually hurt it in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of people watch that stuff on ESPN, and you see these elite level
Yeah, you're like, I
people
can't do none of that.
yeah, they're like, they're looking at these jacked guys or girls or whatever, and they're like, well, that's not me. Like, I can't. And people always have that. It's weird. Like, I even get that today still, where people they contact me and they're like, look, I haven't worked out in 20 years and I'm so out of shape, and like, I don't know if you can take me. And I'm like, no, that I'm looking for you. Like, that's who I want here, is the beginners. Like, but a lot of people have this weird notion that you have to be fit
To
before you
start.
start before you start with a
That
trainer,
will never go
or
away. People
yeah,
are, I mean, it happens in my high school. Kids will be
yeah,
like, I'm going to retro fitness before I come to you. You come to me, we'll do it right out of the
yeah.
gate. But even what you said, like people might consider me as a strong fit guy, but when I look at CrossFit games, I start thinking to myself, is that what they do in a CrossFit gym? I don't even know. And so I'm
No.
automatically not even considering, not that I want to go
Right.
to another gym, but if I wanted to, I don't think I would go to a CrossFit because I see CrossFit games and I just think I don't even know what happens in a CrossFit gym anymore. But people also misconceive what we do, right? The our logo is a tire flip. We barely flip a tire. So
Yeah.
there's some changes that I'm trying to figure out how to even make myself.
Well, that's the thing about personal training. So if like having that in your name, let's say like Baker Personal Training,
Right.
one of the good things about that is it actually it doesn't you're not beholden to any sort of methodology, and it allows some flexibility there. And I think that it's both that can be both a positive and a negative. If you have a very specific methodology, then it's going to attract a certain client, and that's good. I mean, you're able to really niche it down and target your marketing and all that kind of stuff. But it's also going to drive away certain people too. Like you kind of box yourself in if you're the whatever, speed and core or whatever, like you're kind of boxed in to training athletes, right? I mean, because it's in your name, and it's hard to be flexible and pivot. With personal training, man, I get everybody now, and that's kind of cool. I still have my core group of like my older people that come in, just because I think that's generated mainly through like referrals and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But I also get a much younger crowd now that comes in. I get a lot more like women in their 20s and 30s and 40s that
Mm-hmm.
come in that want to tone up and that sort of thing. Which is that, I mean, that's a good market too. Just like your older people's good. I get a lot of parents that want to bring their kids in. Um,
And
because when these,
train with their kids
well,
same
they
time.
or either or,
Yep.
they want to like, I'll refer a lot of that stuff off to my other trainer now because he's in that time zone. But
Okay.
like a lot of times in the summer, I'll do like a 3 day a week, like 1 or 2 hours up at the gym in the afternoon to take advantage of that summertime marketplace of
Yep.
athletes. Cause that's starting in May. That's where it really ramps up with the request to train the kids, because down here in Texas, sports are so big. It's really hard to work with them during the school
Yes.
year. They're like, especially in football, and even now in football, they run an 8 to 12 week camp during the summer,
Yeah,
and
my
it's
friend
it's just hard to
has a
work with
whole
them.
business on that. He's out in Allen, Texas. Gino Pierce. Do you know Gino
Mm-hmm.
Pierce?
I want to say I know the name. I definitely know Allen.
I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, but he runs programs inside of the Texas schools. And he said, Zach, these schools are so massive that freshmen have their own campus. Weight rooms
Yeah,
are 12,000 square feet. So they, he trains coaches, and then these young coaches, like when you and I were young, they will coach friggin' 8 hours a day. They'll be in there at 7 a.m. and they'll run group hour after hour through the morning and then again in the afternoon and evening. He said there's like, I don't know if it was in that area, but when school ends, the sport coaches cannot like connect with the athletes. So he's like, that's our main time to train them. So the summertime
yeah.
is like massive strength camp time, so to speak.
Oh yeah. No, and they've got all that up at the schools now. And so the coaches aren't typically allowed to coach it, I don't think, but it's happening at the schools, and it's kind of one of those things. It's not mandatory, but it is. And so that's cut down. Like I don't work with that many football players anymore. I've always worked with a lot of swimmers, oddly enough,
Yeah,
because they don't
football is
really
hard. It's very
it's
hard. They're stuck with their sport coach.
yeah, they really are. And so down here, which is weird. I mean, I got really into training swimmers, and
Swimmers
just
are awesome,
because they don't really have a strength and conditioning program down here.
and
And
they're so
so,
fit and strong. I was
yeah,
just thinking of it today. I
you
was like, man,
cannot tire them out.
swimmer,
Yeah.
they're some of the best. Like they just take to the training so quickly. I also think that being in the water, even though it's not, like really, if it's an indoor pool, it's not that cold, but being in the water stimulates your appetite. So they
Mhm.
actually go home and eat a lot. So it
Right.
like it pushes their strength and muscle gains, which is what a lot of kids are missing. They don't eat. So
Oh yeah, that's one of these kids that want to gain weight and everything. That's always the missing thing. Is like trying to get them to even think about food.
they
Much less
don't
they're
even,
just
yeah, they're
they're not
nowhere
food
near it.
they're not food conscious. So
Go back to that power building book. Why was that your favorite or one of your favorites to write?
well, one of the reasons is because I used that exact program for myself for a long time, and I was probably my strongest personally running that almost exact program, that I wrote in that book. So I have a lot of personal attachment to it as well. But the one of the systems in there, it's call it the 852 method, was a system that I got very early on in my training when I was in college. There was a power lifter at the gym that I trained at in College Station, Texas, when I was at Texas A&M. And he was like kind of the alpha in in that gym, as there often was. There was a Gold's gym, but it was a very cool gym. It wasn't like a Gold's gym nowadays. It was a lot of power lifters, a lot of bodybuilders. There wasn't a lot of college students there because that campus is so big, and like a lot of the rec center there is like that's where all the kids went. So there wasn't a lot of college kids in this gym, so that's where kind of I wanted to be, around all the power lifters and bodybuilders at the time. And there was a power lifter there, this guy named Bill Winschif. Actually, there's an article about Bill Winschif on, if you want to go way back, to deepsquatter.com.
Oh yeah, baby.
So if you go back, if you can dig up Deep Squatter.
How do I spell Bill's last name?
Winschif, it's Winds, and then I think it's Chief. Chie. Yeah.
Deep
and
Squatter.
he was a power lifter there, very strong guy, thick, and he was short like me. But I just remember this dude had like fucking traps that just like consumed his ears,
Love
and
it.
and just, so when you're like 19 or whatever, like I was, I looked up to him, and he had this very simple training protocol where he would do, like week one on the power lifts, he would do like 3 sets of 8. And then week 2, he would do like 3 sets of 5. And then in week 3, he would do 3 sets of 3. And then he would just repeat that cycle, and just that's basically it, and like he did some accessories.
3 sounds like a Marty Gallagher program.
Yeah, it's similar, to that. And so when I started using that way later, like it was one of those things that registered in my brain, but I didn't take to it right away. It like sat there for years, and then I pulled it out of my memory hole years later and started using it on myself. And it's like, damned if it didn't work really well. And the only thing I did was I changed, I used sets of 8, sets of 5, sets of 2 instead of the 3s. I did 8, 5s, and 2s. And
on deadlifts, you did 8s too?
Yeah.
Damn.
It's brutal. For a lot of people, I've cut that out. Like, or I'll tell them, just do one all out set. Don't do 3,
yeah.
But it especially for like my bench and my squat and my overhead press, like that system like really, really worked for me. And that I started using it with clients a lot. And God, it's been, if I had to have like one training system, like I was forced to just use one training system for the rest of my life, that's probably what I would go to. It's so dependable and reliable.
People go, I think, too heavy. And so doing those 8s, it's that like, it's not too light, it's heavy. And those probably reps 6, 7, and 8 are very tough, and they push the growth.
And they push a lot of growth. And I remember I had breakfast, one of the best breakfasts I ever had, the best breakfast I ever had. I had with Kurt Kurwoski. The best breakfast I ever had was with Kurt Kurwoski several years ago in Wichita Falls. Rippetoe had him come down to one of our starting strength seminars as a guest speaker.
Yeah.
And so it was great. Like Kirk, I got to hang out with him the whole weekend. And so
he's a wild man.
It was pretty cool. Like, because it's like, damn, this is Kurt Kurwoski. You get like you're getting like the little bit of hero worship and everything, which I try to avoid, but it was hard not to, because he was definitely an idol of every kid.
What was the breakfast?
Fucking the Comfort Inn Continental breakfast or whatever it was. I didn't even care.
It was the guest breakfast.
Stale bagels or whatever, so it was just in that hotel lobby, and, but I remember, of course, I had like an hour with him. And of course, I'm just like fanboying, like picking his brain about training stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him about the 8s, because I know, like, you read all Marty Gallagher's old stuff. Like they did a lot, him and Ed and all that did a lot of 8-rep training at the beginning of their cycles.
Yeah. They did that long, like linear periodization.
Right. And he was like, that he's like, the thing is like the 5s were what really built, the strength. Like that's what really was and Marty will say this too, like the 5-rep sets were really at the core of pushing up those numbers, but the 8s made the 5s easier.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of those things. If you really condition yourself and you really get strong to those 8-rep sets, and then you drop 3 reps off of those and convert to fives, it's like going from a 400 meter to a 100 meter in track. Like it's so much easier to do that. And so it, that was their whole thing, was like Kirk said, we would make those eights really hard. Like on deadlifts, when we did the 8 rep deadlifts, like we would always do them from deficits. Like just how fucking hard can we make the training? And then when we pulled the deficit out and dropped from eights down to fives, fucking no problem. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean,
Wow.
or at least seemingly in your head, it's a lot heavier, of course, but your mind, because 8 rep sets fucking suck. And people don't realize like the difference. You say, well, between 5 and 8, like that's only 3 reps. But when it's
Those last
heavy,
three are brutal.
they're brutal. They're brutal, and they build a lot of muscle mass. They're hard, but they're not like beating, like they're not like crushing your body like threes and all that kind of stuff too. Especially at the poundages those guys were using. You couldn't train, below 5 reps year round. Like not at those poundages. They would have been riddled with injuries and everything. So it was almost a necessity to train that way. But that's what they would do. They would train a long time with those eights, get really, really strong. You read some of the, you never know how much this stuff was ghost written and how much was real or whatever. But you look at like Kazmaier's, training or whatever, and he did a lot of that stuff
That's
too.
right.
Like he wrote about he would get as strong as possible on
His
like
stuff looked like pure bodybuilding.
it was like pure, like he would just like 8 reps, 8 to 12 reps on
Yeah.
everything, and just but there's some genius to that, where it's like if you just spend as much, like a long period of time getting as strong as you can in an 8 to 12 rep range, and then you drop down to fives, like how much more room do you have to run, doing that? And so that was a lot of what Kazmaier talked about too, was getting as strong as possible. And then before the meets or whatever, then you drop down to that heavier stuff and kind of peak out.
Man, I'm gonna have to
But
cycle it in. I'm just always like, I think as I've gotten older and mileage, I try not to get too much volume on the barbell lifts,
yeah,
but I think I'm gonna do it and try to bring up the trap game. And I tell my wife, listen, traps are the new abs. I don't really.
I've gotten some of the best deadlift gains in my life at 41, deadlifting like heavy. I mean, like once every 2 to 3 weeks, like one set. I pulled 8 at 515 the other day, which is pretty good. I've never been a great deadlifter. That's pretty
That's
good for me.
great. How tall are you?
5'4",
Eight
and
reps at 515. Jesus.
and I've got shitty, I was always a good bencher and an overhead presser because I've got, kind of a big chest and T-Rex arms. So, but it makes deadlifting hard. But just cutting my deadlift volume way back and just
Yeah,
going with that
I have a
one all
motto.
out set.
My motto on the deadlift is if you kill the deadlift, it will kill you.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Yeah.
I've also gotten like my deadlift bumps up when I don't kill it. Like if I use the deadlift, it's more of like speed work. At this age now, I could max out once every 6 months. I pulled 495 like 2 months ago. I won't do that again for a while, but I could squat on the regular. Something I'm bringing back as I work a little more on like my lats and pec and mobility is maybe some behind the neck push presses or behind the neck power jerks, stuff that was like quote unquote taboo in our, nowadays. But when we were younger, it was like a normal lift. And I speak with a strength coach and weightlifting coach from Indiana. His name's Mark Garrett. He's out of high school. And he's like, listen, man, all these baseball players that come to me when they talk about shoulder problems, he's like, we get good at like overhead squats with the pause and snatches and behind the neck presses. He's like, their shoulder problems go away.
Yeah.
Yet
That was the
it's so
thing with
taboo in
yeah,
the
with
strength
swimmers.
world.
That was a big thing with swimmers, was that they were very like, but remember there was this big thing, and I don't, I'm not going to mention any names because I highly respect both these guys, but there was a big thing among, if you were an overhead athlete, you should never press overhead. In other
Yeah.
words, if you were a
Yes.
pitcher, or
Don't
if you were
ever go overhead.
if you were a
Yeah.
swimmer, you should never press overhead. And the thing is training these high school swimmers, they would all come in and every one of them came in with shoulder problems. They're 15, 16. They really shouldn't have a lot of issues like that. But and most of it was with girls. The girls had way more problems than the guys did, and all it was that their joints are weak for the number of repetitions they're putting it on. And so when you see big differences like that across the genders, you have to look at, well, what's the main difference between the boys and the girls? It's generally just going to be levels of strength. And so
Strength, stability.
same thing with like girls knee injuries or whatever. And so you'd see the same thing. And so I'd overhead press them 2 or 3 times a week, just starting off with the bar, like just strict good form.
Yeah.
Overhead presses, like 3 sets of 5. And within like 2 weeks, there's all those, it's just mainly inflammation and stuff like that, but just getting them stronger.
It's
All those shoulder
optimal
problems.
volume. You did
Yeah.
optimal volume with them versus like killing them and going into fatigue. That to me, that's just
Yeah.
smart coaching
Yep.
that you gain from lots and lots of coaching. It's, do you talk about that in practical? I'm embarrassed to say I don't have practical programming. I have starting strength. I'm actually super interested in the what's the other book for
The barbell prescription.
barbell prescription. That's like I'm excited to dig into those books.
That's a great one if you have like older people, especially like in your circle, like family or friends or whatever. I always give people that. I'm like, read the first 2 chapters, like, because they're intimidated by the thick, they open it up and it looks like a college textbook, and I'm like, just read the first 2 chapters, like just get bought in to the whole thing, because Sully does a masterful job of explaining why it's
He's a
important
gym
for
owner
older
too,
people.
right? He has a starting strength gym.
Gray Steel Fitness up in Michigan, and Gray Steel, I thought that was a perfect name for what he does.
That is a cool name.
He only trains people that are 50 and over, I think.
Gray Steel Fitness.
Yeah, because it's like you want to target it towards old people, but you can't call it like old people fitness, right? Or like, because the one thing about seniors, they don't want to be called seniors.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So they don't want to go work out at a place that's associated with like, old folks home fitness program. But so Gray Steel, I thought that was so good because it's got the implications, like you're starting to get a little gray.
That's right.
It's like tough, so it's a Gray Steel Fitness. And yeah, he was actually, when he started the gym, he trained like on Wednesdays and Sundays at the gym because he was still full-time practicing medicine. And he eventually got out of medicine, as I think he was the head of emergency medicine at whatever hospital there in Detroit. I mean, and he just said, I'm helping more people on the preventative side.
Right.
Getting these older people stronger. I'm changing more lives and doing more good than I was at the hospital. And, the thing is with having somebody like Sullivan on your team is that it's one thing when me or you tell an older person that they need to lift weights, especially when you're younger, when you're 25 and you're telling somebody that's 60 that they need to lift weights. They're like, what does this fucking kid know? But when their doctor says something, when the MD said, especially that boomer generation, they put so much weight on what doctors say.
Correct.
They're almost like godlike, reverence for doctors. So you can but when you get a doctor that's on your side, you kind of use that to where the doctor is, not only does he lift weights, but he's telling you, yeah, you should lift weights. And all of the medical and scientific literature, more and more and more, is pointing to that. And so it's really, really helpful to have those initials behind the name, of somebody. And I think you're seeing a lot more of that, of people jumping on board with the strength training for old people, which is a great thing.
It's to me, I'm really concerned with what this younger generation will look like when we are older. I tell these kids all the time, I'm like, yo, when you guys are running this country, I'm fucking out of here. I'm in a cabin in the woods because you guys are going to like blow this world up.
Yeah. We used to say we're going to go to Canada, but now I'm like, fuck that. I'm not going there either. Like, that's
we're
worse.
not going to Canada. It's, a concern to me is, there's all this information out and kids are not stronger or fitter. It's just not, like, I don't know why. I think it's the phone and the convenience of everything goes against being strong. If you want to get strong, I don't want to say it's not convenient, but it takes you, pushing and challenging yourself. And people want to do, hey, I just want 15 minutes at home, or I don't, I go to the gym and I only do this.
There's a lot of components to it. The other, there's some weird things going on with this current, and of course, every generation says this about the younger generation, that they're all fucked up and that, they're going to destroy the country and all that. But, I think we might be right about it this time, but they,
to be determined.
If you notice, like, my niece and nephew and like some of my clients' kids and stuff, like a lot of these kids don't want to they don't get their driver's license till they're like 19 years old.
They don't care if they don't have it. It's
They don't care if they
insane.
don't have it. And you were probably like me when you were like 15, dude. All I could think about was getting my license
I
at
was
16.
driving illegally. I was
Right.
driving my friends. I learned to drive on his Volkswagen Bug 4-speed. I may have been definitely was 15 driving that thing.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say, I hate to admit it, but by the time I was like 16, 17, I could, not only could I drive, I could drive drunk pretty well too. So so I'm not, so what I'm saying by that is that
Such skill.
it is, but that type of behavior, which is not good. I'm not bragging about it necessarily, but
It's just funny.
that type it is, but that type of high risk behavior is down in kids. Like teenage pregnancies are down. Drug use, a lot of the drunk driving, all that kind of associated like high risk behavior with teenagers is way down. So there's some good things to that, but there's the downside is that they're not. It says something about the psyche is they're not pushing themselves out there like
I'd have to
that.
look at
Um,
things like suicide rates. I'm from what I see, I don't know what the data says. If I looked at CDC, I hear about it a lot more, which shows that like people are, or this younger generation is not able to handle stress. And,
yeah, and they're sitting at home on their phones,
yeah,
looking at
and
Instagram and seeing how.
quitting
Yeah,
is a normal option for this generation, meaning, all right, you went out for the team, you don't like it, you quit. I didn't even know that was allowed when I was in high school. I explained to people I lost every wrestling match my freshman year,
yeah.
and I did not know that I was allowed to quit. And then kids told me near the end, the last week, they're like, "Oh, we were betting when you were going to quit." And when the kids said that to me, I was like, I didn't even know you could quit. I thought you do this, you just finish it. And so quitting it's just a different, I don't know, way of living. Just like I said, like, oh, I didn't know you could fail under the squat bar. I thought you were making the rep or you will die under that bar.
Well, look at the military. Look at they're having trouble filling the military ranks. Like recruitment is way down. I mean,
I
there's less
posted
kids. There's
something on
less.
this and
Yeah,
I
there's less
knew
kids. There's less kids wanting to join now. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Like I'm
I
not.
look,
I'm.
I wouldn't encourage my kids, seeing the lack of support we get, like, the things
I
these
would.
people go through. But
I
what we're talking about is their fitness levels.
right.
When I
Well,
posted
it's
that, I
yeah.
knew
So
people
like
were going to flip out.
well, there's like speaking as a vet, I'm the same way. Like I wouldn't necessarily encourage my kids to join the military right now either. And there's other reasons, like there's political stuff.
Yes, that's what I'm
But
saying.
but aside from that, you take that part of it out and you just look at the population of kids that we have now. They're not wanting to necessarily engage in that type of, what if you want to call it, risky behavior or putting themselves out there, like, and it's not just that, but like the physical standards are being lowered by the military branches. And I
Very
think,
dangerous.
yeah,
And they are
it
not high at all. Like I looked at the entry level, it was something like 3 pull-ups.
yeah,
Running a mile and a half was something like 14 and a half
yeah, you
minutes.
could walk it in that time.
And
And
when I shared this, Andy, some knucklehead commented on the Instagram. He's like, "Can you pass it?" And I wanted to say, like, motherfucker, 3 pull-ups, I fucking do it with
yeah,
one arm.
yeah, I mean, I have a 70-year-old client that could do that. I mean, it's
I
not
couldn't believe the guy
the
asked me the question. I was like,
yeah, I
I'm
mean, there's
laughing at it, but I think he was serious, like saying, "Oh, you big shot." What my point is that calisthenics should be a normal part of a kid's life, being strong and fit. And here's the other thing, like you kind of mentioned it as risky behavior. I think with my experience being around kids, they don't want to do, I don't want to say they, but this theme or this vibe is they don't want to do it unless it's on their schedule, their feeling. So even what I do with strength and conditioning, sports performance, it's not as popular as it once was because kids want to, I always do this in air quotes. I'm on my own program. They want to go to retro and do their own thing, including my son. He goes there and I say, Ethan, once a week, you need to go to the underground because you need to sprint, you need to jump. But when he goes to retro, he'll tell me, he's like, Dad, I squatted and I did 5 sets of 3. And after each set, I did 3 box jumps. So like he's implementing it, but he likes the freedom. And he's a more motivated kid. But a lot of kids, I never lost kids to this kind of thing. But about 4 years ago, I started getting comments from dads like, he wants to train with his friends. And he feels like, or another comment would be like, he doesn't like that it's a 30-minute ride to the gym and he wants to spend time with friends. Kind of, up to like 8 years ago, 5 years ago, I never heard that. Kids were signing up because they wanted to train to win. They wanted to be killers.
That's what I think is like what's happening a little bit like in the military is I think by putting it out there that they're making it easier, it actually makes a certain type of person not want to do it. Like I wanted to join when I was that age, when I had testosterone was dripping out of my ears, I wanted to join the Marine Corps because it was hard. I
Yes,
didn't
you
want to be, if the
wanted the
Marine Corps was
tough.
like, and now it's like, it's like these kids, like you're saying, they want to call the parents want to call the Marine Corps and be like, do you have a 3 day a week option? Like, it's like, no, and I think a lot, but I think by making it easier, you're still not going to get the lazy ones, but the ones that would do it are saying, I don't want to do that. Like, cause it sounds like it's too easy now. Like, you know what I'm
You're
saying? I
right.
think
You lower the standards and they're like, you know what? I'll just do my own thing. Our country is
I,
in a real
I
scary
remember,
slash
and
strange
I was
place.
very, it is, and I was very impressionable at that age. And I can remember going to the recruiting office, and I remember like the Army and the Marine Corps offices were right next to each other. And I remember the Army recruiter was like coming up to me with paperwork and was like, "Hey, come inside and like come join us," and tell me how great it was. And the Marine Corps recruiter kind of looked at me and was like, "If you want second best, go ahead." Like he
That
could live like,
you were a
and it was like,
Marine.
it's like
Yeah.
I want to go there because they acted like they didn't want me. It's like that Ryan Lee thing, the velvet rope marketing thing, and it was a tactic, but it was true. Is like, we can live with or without you, whereas this other guy's clamoring to get me in his office.
The
I
right.
wanted to
The
go with the one
Marines
that,
had that mystique about their boot camp was the toughest. And if you were going to fake an injury, they were sending you home. Like they're not going to try to, okay, are you really hurt? Is your knee really hurt? All right, we'll send you the fuck home. You don't
and,
want to
and I
be here.
and I actually think if they brought some of that back, that some of that attitude back, that actually
Yeah.
might help their recruiting a little bit because there's a certain type of person that wants to they want to choose what's hard, not and that option. It's almost like they're competing to see what's easy.
I like that from, going back to our early part of the conversation about having an online business. Having the online business always allowed me to be selective of who we
Mm-hmm.
train. And so, you know, about a month ago, we stopped training a kid. And I know if I didn't have an online business, I don't want to say I know, but I'm sure I'd be like, just train them. You need the money, whatever, deal with them. But now I'm like, listen, if you ain't showing up and you're not working, then get the fuck out of here. I don't
Well,
want, I will, I
your
will
buddy
run this
Joe
gym with 4
DeFranco,
people.
he posted something like that. I've heard him with that story, years ago because his gym got pretty legendary status back
Yeah.
in the early 2000s. And I think part of that,
Yeah.
I remember him saying,
He kicked out 2 kids.
yeah. And
I
it
don't
was
know
like,
if they were brothers or what it was, but the word got around. Like they
yeah,
were at lunch and they're like, yeah, like we got kicked out. And somebody's like, oh, you got kicked out of there. And me, I did it when I was so crazy when I first started coaching athletes. Like I had no tolerance for a lack of effort and a kid who wouldn't eat breakfast. And maybe my lack of knowledge of what kids have died getting traded the wrong way, right? The kids in
yeah.
Texas had rhabdo, or I think somebody died
Oh,
from
there was some school in Iowa or something where it was like 7 kids
though that
wind
was
up
the
in,
college football program. We've
yeah.
had there was a girls basketball player in Georgia, and I look back to what I went through as a wrestler, not eating for a day, training 3 hours, and then going and running a 10 kilometer. I was fine. But now, kids, I get it. People are like, so what? Kids did 300 push-ups. They go to the hospital. We did that all the time. Yes, we did. But that was 30 years ago. And the truth is, that is just not where kids are anymore. And so you can't
Mhm.
do that. And so in my early like trial workout of the early days underground was like fucking destroying people. And I didn't quite grasp it. I was like, this shit should be normal. You should be able to walk on your hands and do pull-ups. You should be able to like power clean the sandbag. But people were like throwing up and quitting and just getting destroyed. And then what's weird too, from a business standpoint, is parents, dads, wrestling dads, I was getting so many of them, they wanted their kid to throw up. And I saw people throw up all the time at wrestling practice. So it didn't like scare
Yeah.
me. Now it's like, okay, we're going to do a little bit of calisthenics. Go take a rest over there. Just rest for a few minutes. It'll be 5 minutes before I let the kid come back in. I'm going to warm them up. Hey, jump in. I see them getting a little winded. I'm like, go get some fresh air. It's just easy. And then you know what hit me? Like going back, I've been in this location 10 and a half years. A kid like went outside, sat down, vomited on himself, and just sat in the vomit. Whereas like at my first gym, I'd be like, run, and they'd be like running and throwing up. They'd throw up against the fence. And then the other kids would be like, you want to fucking come back, you
Yeah.
pussy. It was
Yeah.
like, it was such a different 20 years ago. The kid would be like, I better come back and train after throwing up or I'll never make it back. Whereas now, like, kids would throw up, sit in their vomit, and just not even get up. And so when people are like, the world is not different, you're different, I'm like, yo, I'm been around kids for, a quarter of a century. I started training kids in 02. I started really working with athletes in 94, 93 when I was coaching wrestling. People are different, including,
Oh yeah.
I say, like, the kids of today are being raised by the parents, by the kids who grew up in the 80s and 70s, myself, which is so weird because we were fed to the wolves. It was like, hey, go outside and you didn't come back for dinner or come home till, late. Today, it's like, you know, my wife is like, oh, like they need their phone. I'm like, whatever, but
Yeah.
it's just it's interesting how we've changed it. But anyway, I don't want to get too much sidetracked. So let's shut it down, Andy. I think we went like 2 hours. We killed
That's
this.
all. That's all
We
right. That's all
killed
good.
it. It was such a good conversation. Is there a question I should have asked you that we didn't? I mean, we really could go for another 5 hours probably. Did I
Nah.
not ask a
Who knows?
question or
We
topic you wanted?
no, I don't care. I mean, I enjoy the conversation. So, I mean, I've got a lot of content out there. So if people want to know something about what I
I'll
think
link it
about,
all up. I
you
will
know,
link it up.
I mean, if people want to know about how I train or, that sort of stuff, I've got over a
On
decade
YouTube.
worth of content out there. And,
Yeah, you
um,
filmed
you
full
know,
workouts.
yeah. So, the best place to go find my stuff is just andybaker.com.
Okay.
That's where all my programs are. I've got a blog there that it's actually still active. I enjoy the article writing stuff, whether anybody reads them or not. I still
Me
write the
too.
articles.
Yeah, me
And,
too.
like I said, it's preserved there. I kind of gave up on YouTube a few years ago. It
I
just got
noticed
too,
that.
well, I think we were talking about it. YouTube used to be set up your iPhone, lean it against a dumbbell and hit record and then go do now. It's like if you don't have like movie grade shit,
All
nobody's
right.
watching it. So
You know what we got to do?
I've gone to I like Instagram.
Yeah,
Instagram's for a tech idiot like me, Instagram's easy to use. And so I've got an Instagram if you want to link to that.
you know what else is good though? On YouTube, what works, and this is good for, use the YouTube shorts.
Yeah, I need to get back
Um,
into those because
you
I
know
I
why?
use
Because it's short, and I hate it's like people will
yeah.
not watch. They will watch a long video if it's like you said, professionally edited. And the other thing I do is I use Fiverr. I go on Fiverr.com.
Mhm.
I get people to make me thumbnails. I resisted the YouTube game for a while. And then I said, there's two ways to look at it. Naval Ravikant says the way to win the game is to not play the game. But this is the game. And if I want my online presence to keep going, I need the YouTube and whatnot. And I wish I could find somebody closer to do that stuff. But there's things in business that you got to do it, as you
Oh
know,
yeah.
even if you don't like it. In nutrition, I always say I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but I really can't eat them. So
Yeah.
if I only did what I like to do, things wouldn't work out. But I'm going to link up your website, your Instagram, And your books, I mean, must have been amazing. And those books are published through Rips, the Asgard company, or no?
Yeah, he owns the publishing company, so
That is
they all do all the publishing
genius.
in house. But they're you can get them through the Asgard company, or you can get them on
Amazon.
Amazon as well. So
He's genius with that. I'm actually working on finishing this nonfiction book. The book is finished. My cover designer is finishing his part, and then we got to do the whole design. And it's interesting. Like, you think you wrote the book and now it's done. Nope. Now it's like
oh yeah.
the whole setup process is very challenging. It's the not fun stuff, but that's what it takes to get it
Well,
out
yeah,
there.
and just the stuff people don't realize, like like we've dealt with this a little bit when you if you want to go back and make an update, like you don't, especially when you have a book like ours that have like lots of tables and charts and all that kind of stuff, like the page layout is really hard to get right on a long book. So like you add two sentences somewhere in there and it bumps half of
Oh my
that
God.
chart to the next page. The whole, it's like chaos theory. The whole,
Yes.
like, if a sentence is added somewhere in the book, it fucks up everything that follows. So that's not an easy process. Thankfully I didn't have anything to do with that, but I know like that's one of those things you don't realize when you're publishing a book, is just like the layout is a
Yeah.
huge challenge to
It's
make it
interesting
readable.
that,
Because if you look at cheap ebooks and stuff, like some you get them and there's like you flip the page and there's like one sentence on the next page, like one
yeah.
hanger on. Like it's hard to get a book that doesn't have that kind of shit, that is a very readable. And so like if you're looking at a table, to make sure the text that talks about that table is on a page that's next to it. You know what I'm saying? So that it's not, you don't have to read the table and then flip the page in order to read about what was on the table.
What
Like
what's
that's not hard. That's not easy to do.
and it's a lot, it costs a lot of money. What's your
It
favorite
does.
non-training book?
Oh God, that's a
Or if you
hard
want to
one.
go easier, what's your like, give me a top movie recommendation.
Oh, top movie recommendations, man. I love. Well, the best movie ever made is Lonesome Dove. Hands down. It's the
Lonesome
greatest
Dove. Why
Western
do I
movie
not?
ever.
A
It's the
Western.
greatest.
Okay.
It's the greatest Western movie ever made, and to me, it's the greatest movie ever made. It was originally a mini series on like CBS. It's like a 6 hour type thing. It was aired in 4 parts, but that is some of the best acting that you'll. If you love westerns, you gotta watch Lonesome
Right.
Dove. Robert
I'm not a
Duvall,
big,
Tommy Lee Jones.
oh, Tommy Lee Jones. Okay. All right.
Tommy Lee Jones, Robert Duvall, Danny Glover. I mean,
Oh, wow.
it's a great cast. It's a, like, you look at the cast in there, and it's like, wow.
I think I've
Um,
seen bits and pieces of it somehow, some way. Do
yeah,
you have a book that you're like, any kind of
well,
book?
I love Lonesome Dove. The movie was based on the book. I'm kind of a Russian history fanatic. I don't know why. I have no connection to Russia whatsoever. But the country has always just fascinated me. So anything by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, I think that's very relevant to today. I love anything to do with Russian literature and Russian history is very interesting to me. So I'm reading a book right now about the Soviet exile system going back to the 1500s. And you
Holy,
talk about you think our world is fucked up? Holy shit.
oh,
Like
damn.
Russia in the 1500s. That's like, what the fuck is going on there? Like, I mean, you talk about
Russia
some
in the
crazy stuff.
1500s
So
could be like New Jersey of today. New
yeah,
Jersey's
I mean, it's just
out of
nuts.
control.
So, but
Very good, dude. This has been awesome. It's been great to have like just kind of such a wide array of topics. So Andy Baker or Andy Baker Strength? See,
just andybaker.com.
good for you for getting such an easy website. I mean, the
Oh
business
yeah.
name, the website, you killed it. I
I had
screwed
to
it all up.
I had to pay some motherfucker in the Caribbean $5,000 for that.
That MFer. You didn't want to go with andybaker.net?
Nope. Ryan Lee, man, he told me, do not settle for andybaker.net. He said, you pay whatever and you get andybaker.com.
Really?
So I did. I should have asked Ryan to front me the $5,000 at the time because I didn't have it, but I think
You know,
it's paid off over time.
I'm trying to like, I have so much content on zachevanish.com. It's going to be real hard to move stuff. I own zachstrength.com. That's where I send people to for like the newsletter, but ZachEvanish.com. That's a
If
tough one.
it's a good tip for your young guys that are watching this that might coach. But if you can, buyyourname.com.
Yes.
Because and what those and like what those motherfuckers will do, people that haven't been in this game don't realize is that there's these squatters that buy
Yeah.
these domain names and sit on them and then charge you for to buy them back. And what they'll do if you
Exorbitant amounts of money.
yeah, and if you buy andybaker.net, then they'll take andybaker.com and link it to a porn site, and so that they're extorting you. So you have to, because people aren't going to remember andybaker.net. They're going to remember andybaker.com. And then so it pays to go get your
Or
name.com.
your buddy might be the smartest who doesn't even have a website.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Then you don't have to worry about that. He never had to front $5,000 to buy his name.com.
Exactly. Damn,
So
dude. So it's, I don't know what's right or what's wrong anymore, but I want to thank everybody for listening. Share it with friends, leave a 5-star review, andybaker.com. I will link up the old YouTube videos and your Instagram. And you've also been on other podcasts and written articles for Starting Strength that you've been on their podcast. So I think if you Google Andy Baker Strength, you're going to come across a lot of Andy's work, and you have a lot of online programs that people could buy. I have a lot too. And I think people like to kind of
they
test
do.
out. Yeah. They like
Yeah.
to have like these ebbs and flows of programs. So I'm going to encourage people to check it out. But Andy, hang tight while I stop the recording so I could have a proper goodbye.